Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a nice idea if everyone can leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. It started about 10 minutes after I left work. I was closing that night, so I didn't get out until a little after midnight. The roads were mostly empty. I worked at this small 24-hour gym on the edge of town, and my drive home took me through a mix of back roads and residential streets. No highways. Just a quiet, slow ride, maybe 35 minutes depending on the lights. I was tired. Not the kind of tired where you yawn a lot, but the kind where everything feels kind of flat. My brain was just checked out. I remember thinking about what leftovers I had in the fridge and whether I'd bother heating them up. It was one of those nights. I took a left at the light near the gas station, like I always do, and that's when I first noticed the van. White, no windows on the side, just two in the back. Kind of beat up. No logos or writing. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, people drive vans. It's not weird. But then I took a right on Larchmont, and the van followed. Again, not weird. It's a regular road. Then I took another left on Grover, mostly out of habit because I liked avoiding the main drag, and the van followed again. I remember glancing in my rearview mirror and thinking, that's 3 in a row. Just one of those passing thoughts. I made a point to turn onto a smaller street, Pinewood, that only loops back out to Grover again. It's kind of useless unless you live on it. The van turned in behind me. That's when I started to feel it. Not panic or anything. Just a little nudge of awareness, like my body realized something before my brain did. I drove slower, thinking maybe they'd go around me, but they didn't. They kept their distance, maybe 5 or 6 car lengths behind. Not tailgating, not in a rush. Just cruising behind me, like they had all night. I took a left again, back to Grover. So did the van. Okay. At that point I figured maybe I was being paranoid. There were houses all along these streets. Maybe the driver lived nearby and just happened to be going the same way. But then I passed my usual turn for home. Just drove right past it. I live in a little cul-de-sac, and I wasn't about to lead someone straight to my driveway. I kept going. So did the van. I took a right. Then a left. Then another left, doubling back toward the main road. Every time, they stayed behind me. Not speeding. Not hesitating. Just there. I switched up my route completely. Took roads I didn't normally take. Some were narrow and curved through neighborhoods I'd never really paid attention to before. It was almost 12:45 by then, and everything was dark. Most houses didn't have porch lights on. There were no cars coming the other way. Just me and this van. I stopped at a 4-way stop and waited. A full count of 10 seconds. Just sitting there. The van stopped too. Didn't honk. Didn't pull around me. Just waited. Same distance. Same quiet. I kept driving. I turned down a road that curved hard to the left, then split into 2 short streets. I turned right onto the one that dead-ended at a park entrance. Figured if they followed, I'd know for sure. There's nothing on that road except the entrance to a walking trail and some trash bins. Nobody should be going there at 1 a.m. The van followed. I slowed way down. Pulled into the small parking lot by the trail and parked right under a streetlight. I turned off the car but kept my hands on the wheel. The van pulled in behind me. It didn't park, just idled at the entrance to the lot. Headlights on, lighting up the back of my car. I sat there, didn't move. It was quiet enough to hear the engine humming behind me. I watched the mirrors, trying to see the driver, but I couldn't. The windshield was dark. Maybe tinted, maybe just shadowed. A few minutes passed. I don't know exactly how long, but long enough that I started sweating even though the air was cold. I started to think maybe I'd call the cops, even though I didn't know what I'd say. A van's following me didn't sound like something they'd rush out for. But just as I reached for my phone, the van pulled forward. It drove slowly past me, real slow, and turned back toward the road. I watched it roll out of the lot and disappear around the curve. I sat there for another minute, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. Then I started the car and pulled out the opposite way, taking a roundabout path back toward home. I kept checking the mirrors the whole time. Every stoplight, every intersection. But the van was gone. I finally got home around 1:30. I parked 2 blocks away and walked, just to be sure. Didn't see anything. Next morning, I checked my dash cam. I'd bought it a few weeks earlier after a minor fender bender. It's not fancy, just records on a loop. I scrolled through the footage and found the part where the van showed up. There it was, clear as day. No plate on the front, no markings. Then I watched the part where it pulled into the lot. This is what made my stomach drop. The moment the van pulled in behind me, the interior light in my car turned on. Just for a second. Just a flicker. That only happens when a door's not fully shut. I hadn't opened any doors. I hadn't moved. I'd just been sitting there, staring at the mirror. I replayed it over and over. Same flicker. Like someone had pulled the handle just a little, just enough to make the light twitch. It never turned on again. I went out and checked my doors. All locked. No signs of anything. I don't know who was in that van, or what they wanted. I don't know how long they'd been following me before I noticed. But I know they were trying something. Something careful. Something that took time. I changed my route to work after that. And I don't drive straight home anymore. Not without making sure I'm alone first. It was a Wednesday night. Slow. The kind of shift where I just leaned on the counter and counted down the hours. I worked the overnight at a 24-hour gas station out on the edge of town, near the industrial park. Nothing fancy, just 4 pumps, a little convenience store, and a tiny back room with a flickering TV. Usually the only people that came in after midnight were truckers or the occasional sketchy dude grabbing cigarettes. It was around 2:10 a.m. I remember because I just restocked the gum lac and was checking the clock, wondering if I could justify eating another microwave burrito. No one had been in for over 20 minutes. Everything was quiet, except for the buzzing from the overhead lights and the occasional thump of the cooler compressor kicking on in the back. I didn't see him pull in. No headlights, no engine noise. But I looked up, and he was just there. Standing outside the door. Not coming in, not walking away. Just standing there with one hand in his coat pocket, staring through the glass. He wasn't dressed like most people who came in that late. Long coat, buttoned up all the way, even though it wasn't cold out. His face was kind of blank. Not angry, not smiling. Just still. The lights from inside lit him up weird through the glass, made his eyes look darker than they probably were. I waited a second, expecting him to open the door, but he didn't move. I reached over and hit the automatic door unlock button behind the counter, just in case it had jammed. It slid open with a little ding. He walked in, slow, no rush. Didn't look at the snacks or the drinks or the shelves. Just walked straight toward the counter and stopped a few feet away. Didn't say a word. I asked if he needed help with anything. He didn't answer. Just kept staring at me, like he was waiting for something. I noticed his jacket looked a little too big for him. The sleeves almost covered his hands. It started to get uncomfortable. I tried again, asked if he was looking for gas or needed to use the restroom. Still nothing. Then he pulled his phone out, held it up, and took a picture of me. No flash, no warning. Just click, one photo. And then he turned and walked out. I stood there frozen for a second, like I didn't even register it right away. He didn't buy anything, didn't speak, didn't even look at anything else. Just walked in, took a picture, and left. I waited a few seconds, then stepped out from behind the counter and looked out the door. He wasn't walking to a car. He was just gone. Like he'd disappeared into the dark. I scanned the lot. Nothing. No vehicles at the pumps. No taillights driving away. I grabbed my phone and called the non-emergency police number. Felt kind of stupid doing it, but I figured it was worth reporting. The dispatcher didn't sound too concerned. Just said they'd send someone to check the area and asked if I felt safe. I said yeah, the guy didn't do anything technically, and I was behind bulletproof glass. Still, for the rest of the shift, I couldn't relax. Every little noise outside made me glance at the cameras. I even locked the door manually for a while, even though it's not supposed to be locked during business hours. Around 3:30, a regular came in, Steve, an older guy who drove delivery trucks at night. I told him about the guy and he kind of shrugged it off. Said maybe it was a weirdo who thought I looked like someone he knew. Probably just high, he said. I wanted to believe that. The next night, I went in for my shift like usual. Tried not to think about it too much. I didn't tell my manager. Figured it would just sound like me overreacting. The first few hours were normal. A couple guys came in for smokes, some teenagers grabbing snacks. Then around 1:45, I looked up at the camera feed and saw movement in the back lot. Not near the pumps, behind the building, where we keep the dumpster and where I take the trash out during slow hours. There's no reason for anyone to be back there. The camera was grainy, but I could see someone standing by the dumpster. Not moving. Just standing. I stared at the screen for maybe a full minute, waiting for them to do something. They didn't. They just stood with their back to the wall, mostly in shadow. Eventually I stepped outside the front, leaned out a little, trying to see if I could get a better look around the side. But from the front of the store, you can't see back there unless you walk all the way around. I wasn't about to do that. I locked the front door, grabbed the cordless phone from behind the counter, and dialed the police again. Told them someone was behind the store, hanging around the dumpster, not responding when I tried calling out. They said they'd send a car. I stayed behind the counter, watching the camera. The figure moved once, just shifted a little to the left, like they were adjusting their stance, but didn't leave. About 10 minutes later, the figure was gone. Just gone. I didn't see them walk off. I rewound the footage and watched carefully. One frame they were there, and the next, they weren't. Like they stepped back into the shadows and disappeared. I never saw a car. Never heard anything. A cop came by around 2:20. He walked around, checked the back, shined a flashlight into the trees behind the dumpster. Said he didn't see anyone. I didn't either. The next night, I parked closer to the door and kept the lights off in the back room. Around midnight, I was stocking shelves when the door opened this time. I didn't hear the ding. I looked up and saw the same man. Same coat, same blank face. He didn't say anything. Just stood in the doorway, half in, half out. I was frozen. I didn't speak this time. He held up his phone again, but instead of taking a picture, he held the screen facing me. It showed my picture. The one he took 2 nights before. Just my face, standing behind the counter, same uniform. Then he turned the phone back around, tapped something on the screen, and left again. I ran out and locked the door immediately. I stayed behind the counter for the rest of the night, holding the store phone in one hand and a can of pepper spray in the other. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold onto it. I didn't call the cops that time. What would I even say? That a guy showed me a picture he'd already taken? After that, I asked to switch to the morning shift. My boss didn't ask questions. Just said, sure thing, like he didn't want to deal with whatever I wasn't saying. It's been months now. I haven't seen him again. But sometimes when I'm walking to my car or waiting at a red light, I think about that photo. I wonder what he did with it. I wonder how many others he took. I don't get much mail, and when I do, it's just the usual ads, bills, grocery coupons. But that day, there was this plain white envelope in the box. No return address. My name and address printed in small, neat letters. Not handwritten. No postage either, which was weird. Like it had been dropped in by hand. It wasn't thick. No bulky stuff inside, just something flat. I figured maybe it was a flyer or something from a neighbor. I opened it on the walk back to the house. There was only one thing inside, a photograph. 4x6, glossy. No note. Just a picture. It was a shot of the back of my house. Taken from inside my backyard. You could see the whole rear of the house, kitchen window, porch light, patio furniture. It looked like it had been taken around dusk. The porch light was on, but the sky was still a little blue. I wasn't in the photo. Neither was anyone else. But I could tell it had been taken recently. The small table on the deck still had the empty soda can I'd left there the night before. I stopped walking and just stared at it. Whoever took it had to have been standing maybe 15 or 20 feet from the house. Inside my fenced backyard. The gate's always locked. I double-check it every night before bed. It doesn't even open unless you lift it a little, since the wood is warped at the bottom. I check the envelope again. Still no return address. Just my name. I walked straight into the house, locked the door, and went out through the garage to check the fence. The gate was closed. Still latched. I opened it, tested it a few times. It made that loud creaking sound it always does. Not something you'd miss, especially at night. It was totally possible someone climbed it. It's not tall, only about 5 feet. But the idea of someone doing that, just to take a picture, and then leaving without a sound, that didn't sit right. I kept thinking maybe it was a prank. A neighbor messing around. I don't really talk to any of them much. No one I was close with. A few nods in passing, that's it. But even that didn't make sense. Who would think that was funny? I brought the photo inside and stared at it for a while. Nothing in it gave me a clue. No shadow, No reflection. Just my house, from a spot where no one was supposed to be. I thought about calling the cops, but what was I going to say? That I got a picture of my house in the mail? No threat, no message. Just a photo. Felt like a waste of time. That night, I kept all the blinds closed. Normally I'd leave the kitchen one cracked for some air, but not that night. I turned off all the lights early and went around checking the doors and windows twice. I barely slept. The next day, nothing came in the mail. I started to think maybe that was it. Some weird one-time thing. 2 days later, another envelope showed up. Same thing, plain, no postage. My name on it. Inside was another photo. This time, it was taken from the side of the house, through the narrow gap between the fence and the neighbor's garage. You could see into my living room window. The curtains were open just a few inches, enough that you could see the top of the couch and the edge of the TV. I sat down right there on the front steps. My stomach felt like it dropped. Again, no note. No message. Just the photo. Whoever was doing this had been walking around the outside of my house, taking pictures in the gaps, like they were casing the place. I hadn't heard a thing. My dog used to bark at the slightest sound, but she passed last year. Now it was just me. I went around the whole house again. Checked the gate. Checked the locks. I even looked for footprints in the grass but didn't find anything. That night I moved a chair into the hallway between the living room and the front door, where I could see both the backyard and the driveway if I kept the blinds angled right. I turned off all the lights and just sat there. For hours. Nothing. At some point I must have dozed off because I woke up around 4 a.m. with a sore neck and the room still dark. I started parking my car in the garage after that. I bought new locks for the back gate and installed a motion light on the side of the house. Still, 5 days later, a third envelope came. This time, it had 2 pictures. One from the back again, closer than the first. Like maybe 10 feet from the house. You could see the curtain pushed open slightly, like whoever took the photo had been peeking in. The second photo was worse. It was of my bedroom window. The blinds were down, but I always leave them tilted slightly to let in light. You could see the shape of me lying in bed. Just the outline. But it was me. I know the way I sleep. I recognized the pillow and the blanket. I couldn't tell if the picture was taken through glass or with a zoom lens or what, but it was from outside. I threw up in the kitchen sink. I didn't call the police. I drove there. I brought the photos with me, told the guy at the front desk everything. He didn't really know what to do. He took down my statement and said they'd increase patrols in the area, whatever that meant. I asked about fingerprints. He said it probably wouldn't be useful since I touched everything. He told me to call if anything else happened. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the hallway again, lights off, holding a flashlight and a crowbar I found in the garage. Every little noise made me tense up. A raccoon knocked over the trash can and I almost had a heart attack. Nothing happened, though. No one came. The next few days were quiet. I kept checking the mailbox obsessively. Nothing showed up. Then, one morning, I went out to grab the paper and noticed something under the mat. A single sheet of photo paper. No envelope. No writing. It was a picture of me, crouched down, unlocking my back gate. Taken from the bushes near the neighbor's yard. It wasn't old. I was wearing the same hoodie I had on 2 days earlier when I changed the lock. I didn't go back inside right away. I just stood there with the photo in my hand, looking around the yard at the trees, at the fence. I kept expecting to see someone standing there, watching. I installed cameras that day. One on the porch, one by the gate, and another facing the backyard. I paid extra to have them installed same day. I didn't care about the cost. The cameras picked up nothing for a week. Nothing suspicious, nothing weird. Just the usual mailman, a few squirrels, the neighbor's cat. I don't know if the cameras scared him off or if he was done. Maybe he was watching and saw me go to the police. Maybe he just got bored. But no more photos came. I still check the mailbox every day. I still leave the hallway light on at night, just in case. I haven't sat in the backyard since. I barely even opened the curtains. I have no idea who did it. And I guess the worst part is, I probably never will. It started on a Friday morning. I woke up, made coffee like always, and when I opened the front door to grab the paper, there was a little folded note on the floor just inside the threshold. Right in front of the door. Just a single sheet of notebook paper, creased down the middle. No envelope. At first I thought it was junk mail that slid through the crack, or something that came with the newspaper. But when I picked it up and unfolded it, it just said, "Wrong place, wrong time." All lowercase, written in kind of messy handwriting. Like someone rushing with a ballpoint pen. I stood there for a second, kind of confused. I looked outside, thinking maybe it blew in somehow, but the door was shut all night. Locked, too. I always double check before bed. It weirded me out, but I figured it was probably just a dumb prank. Maybe a teenager from the building or something. I live on the 3rd floor of a small apartment complex, 3 floors, outdoor walkways, metal stairs. Not the kind of place where strangers just wander in. Still, it bothered me all day. I kept thinking about the way it was folded, like someone had taken the time to make it neat. Not crumpled or torn. No extra words. Just that line. That night, I pushed a chair up against the door. Not because I thought someone would break in, it just made me feel better. I didn't sleep great. The next morning, I opened the door to check, not really expecting anything. But there was another note. Same kind of paper, same fold. But this time the handwriting was totally different. Neat, like the kind of cursive they teach in school. Wrong place, wrong time. Exact same words. That's when I realized it wasn't a joke. I looked up and down the walkway. Nobody was out there. My neighbor across the hall has a ring cam, but he was out of town and I didn't feel comfortable messing with his stuff. I reported it to the office. The lady there didn't seem too concerned. She said she'd make a note of it and that I should call the police if I felt unsafe. I asked if there were cameras around the doors and she just shook her head. Said the complex was working on adding them. That night I stayed up late, kind of half watching TV, half staring at the door. Around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not just walking past. Slow, careful ones. They stopped right outside. I muted the TV. There was a pause, then the faint sound of paper sliding under the door. I jumped up and yanked it open, no hesitation. The walkway was empty. Nobody on the stairs. Nobody turning the corner. Just quiet. I stepped out barefoot, scanned the lot. A car pulled in a few spaces down, but the driver didn't even look at me. I went back inside and locked the door. The note was just sitting there, face down. This one was typed. Printed out. Same words. Wrong place, wrong time. I didn't sleep at all after that. I called the non-emergency line in the morning and explained everything. The woman I talked to asked if I knew who was doing it, or if there had been threats. I said no, just those words. She said to keep the notes in case it escalated. I could file a report, but without a name or camera footage, there wasn't much they could do. I bought one of those cheap little security cams that sticks to the wall with adhesive. Set it up facing the door. It wasn't fancy, no motion detection, just a loop recording on an SD card. But it made me feel like I was at least doing something. 2 days passed. Nothing showed up. I started to think maybe it stopped. Maybe they saw the camera. Then Tuesday morning came. I opened the door and there was another note. But this one wasn't slid under the door. It was taped to it. Big piece of clear packing tape right across the middle. Looked like it had been pressed on hard. The paper was torn from a magazine page this time. Letters cut out and glued in a line. Wrong place, wrong time. All uppercase. I ripped it off and ran to check the camera footage. I sat through about 5 hours of nothing before I finally saw it. 2:37 a.m. A figure walks into frame. Hoodie pulled up, face turned away from the camera. They walk right up to the door, pull something from their pocket, smooth it onto the door with both hands, then walk off. Total time on screen, 11 seconds. They didn't hesitate. They knew exactly where the camera was. I took the car to the police station this time. Showed the footage. The guy there said it was concerning, but again, without a face or a threat, there wasn't much they could do. They did offer to have a car do a drive-by a few times at night. That night, I stayed up again. I had this heavy feeling I couldn't explain. Not fear exactly, more like pressure. Like something wasn't done yet. At 3:08 a.m., I heard something from my bedroom. Not the front door. The window. I live on the 3rd floor. There's no balcony. No ledge. Just the wall and the window. I froze. Didn't move for a second. Then I slowly pulled the blinds aside. Nothing. Just a dark parking lot. Then I looked down. Right below the window, on the sill outside, was a folded piece of paper. I don't even know how they got it there. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. Walked around the whole building. I didn't see anyone. The note was wet with dew. Inside, the writing looked like it had been done with a marker thick, red, kind of smeared. Wrong place, wrong time. I moved out 3 days later. Didn't wait for the lease to end. Didn't care about losing the deposit. I packed everything I could fit in my car, left the rest, and crashed on a friend's couch until I found another place across town. The landlord never called. No one followed me. But for months after, every time I heard a knock or found something on the floor near the door, I'd get the feeling again like I was back in that apartment, standing barefoot in the hallway, holding a note with no return address. It was around 2:30 in the morning when I heard the front door open. I wasn't even fully asleep yet. I had one of those days where I couldn't settle down, kept scrolling through my phone longer than I should have, flipping the pillow, adjusting the blanket, that restless kind of night. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, top floor. Pretty quiet building overall. There's only 6 units. I had one of those DIY security alarms set up, the kind that beeps loud as hell if a door or window opens after it's been armed. Nothing fancy, just enough to give me some peace of mind. That night, I'd armed it before bed like always. Double-checked the front door. Even pulled on it to be sure it was locked. I've always been weirdly cautious about that stuff. So when I heard the front door creak open, just that soft, unmistakable sound of a deadbolt turning, followed by the slow pull of the door dragging slightly across the floor mat, my brain didn't even process it at first. There was no alarm. I sat up slowly. Not like the movie-style sudden jolt. More like I didn't want to believe what I was hearing, so I moved quiet, careful. I didn't hear footsteps. No shuffling. No voices. Just the door opening. I grabbed my phone and tapped it awake. 2:33 a.m. The alarm should have gone off. It was loud, like fire alarm loud. The kind that makes your ears ring. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could. I didn't have anything to defend myself with besides a heavy flashlight I kept by the nightstand. I picked that up. The place isn't big. The bedroom is at the end of a short hall, and from the doorway I could see part of the living room. It was dark, but not pitch black. I have one of those tiny plug-in night lights by the kitchen, just enough to make out shapes. The front door was open about 3 inches. Just barely cracked. Still swinging a little, like it hadn't settled all the way. I didn't move. Just stared at it. I was trying to listen, really listen, but the apartment was completely quiet. Even the fridge wasn't humming. I finally stepped forward, slow. I held the flashlight up like a weapon, even though I knew it'd be pretty useless. It took maybe 6 or 7 steps to reach the door. I kept expecting someone to pop out, or for the door to get yanked open the rest of the way, but nothing happened. When I reached it, I nudged it shut with my foot and locked it. Deadbolt, chain, everything. Then I turned and swept the living room with the flashlight. I felt like my heart was beating in my ears. No one was in there. I checked the kitchen, then the bathroom, then the closet near the entrance. I even pulled the shower curtain back. Nothing. I stood in the middle of the apartment, trying to calm down, but there was this weird buzzing in my head like I'd missed something. That feeling when you walk into a room and forget what you came for, only worse. I finally looked at the alarm system. It still said armed home. Just like it should have. I disarmed it and rearmed it, watching the little light go from red to green and back again. I stayed up the rest of the night with all the lights on. The next day I called the alarm company. I told the guy what happened, and he walked me through the event log. According to their system, the door never opened. No trigger, no alert. He said maybe the sensor got bumped out of alignment. That didn't sit right with me. It hadn't been loose. It would have gone off if the door even opened an inch. I checked the sensor later. It was stuck tight. The adhesive was still solid. No wiggle at all. I set up my old laptop to record from my webcam facing the front door. I figured maybe I'd catch something if it happened again. I didn't really think it would. But 3 nights later, it did. Same time. A little after 2:30 a.m. I was asleep this time. What woke me up wasn't the door, it was the softest sound, like something brushing against fabric. I thought it might be my coat hanging on the back of a chair falling off or something. Then I noticed the apartment was cold. Colder than it should have been. I got up, already feeling sick in my stomach. When I stepped out into the hallway, I could see the door was cracked open again. Just like before. The nightlight from the kitchen cast this thin line of light across the entryway floor. No alarm. No sound. I ran over and slammed it shut, locked it again. This time I shouted out, "Hello? Who's there?" But I knew no one would answer. I checked everything again. Nothing was missing. Nothing moved. No one there. I didn't sleep at all. As soon as the sun came up, I checked the webcam footage. It showed the front door. Still frame after still frame. Me going to bed at midnight. Nothing for hours. Then at 2:33 a.m., the feed skipped. Just a single frame, missing. Then it picked back up with the door already open. No one on camera. No motion. Just a single missing second, then the door was cracked open, swinging slightly. That freaked me out more than anything else. It felt intentional. I started keeping a chair under the doorknob. I didn't care if it was paranoid. I also bought one of those rubber door wedge alarms that makes a screech if someone forces it open. I even taped over the alarm sensor to see if maybe someone was messing with it directly. Things were quiet for about a week. I started to think maybe it was over. Then one night, I came home from work and noticed the living room window was open a crack. Just enough to let air in. I hadn't opened it. I never open it. It doesn't even have a screen. There weren't any signs of entry, no scuff marks, no footprints on the sill. Just a window that should have been closed. I locked it tight and double-checked the others. That night, I didn't sleep in my bed. I stayed up in the hallway with my flashlight and a kitchen knife. Nothing happened. But the next morning, when I went to grab my keys from the dish by the door, they weren't there. I found them on the floor, underneath the couch. Not dropped, tucked under. I lost it. I packed a bag and left. Stayed at a friend's place for the weekend. Told them something weird was going on with my building. Didn't get into details. On Monday, I went back with the apartment manager and asked to be moved. Told him straight up someone had been inside. I didn't care if it was another tenant or someone with a key. I wasn't staying in that unit. To my surprise, he didn't argue. Didn't even ask questions. He said one had just opened up across the courtyard, same layout. Said I could transfer for free. I moved that afternoon. Took everything, even the rug. I didn't sleep easy for a long time after that. I still don't, sometimes. But the door stayed shut. I went out for a solo hike last September, up in the Catskills. I'd done that loop a few times before, nothing too wild, just a few nights, in and out. I don't have a bunch of fancy gear or survival training or anything. I just like the quiet. No phone service, no work calls, no people. Just quiet. I'd set up camp off a side trail, not too far from a stream. Pretty open area. Couple of trees spaced out enough to hang food between them. I picked that spot on purpose because I'd stayed there before. I remembered the flat ground and the good tree cover. There was this one weird stump with a nail sticking out of it, like someone tried to hang something at some point and gave up. I'd seen it before and figured it was left over from a hunter or something. Anyway, first night was normal. Set up camp, ate something quick, listened to a podcast I downloaded. Fell asleep early. Second day I did a long hike out and back, maybe 8 or 9 miles. Didn't see anyone, which was a little weird for that area, even midweek. Usually you pass at least 1 or 2 other people on the trail, but it was just empty. I didn't think much of it. Weather was cooling off, maybe people were staying home. When I got back to my site, it was just starting to get dark. I filtered some water, boiled it for dinner, same routine as always. I remember noticing it was really quiet. No wind, barely any insects. Just that heavy, still kind of quiet that makes your ears feel like they're straining to pick something up. I went to sleep around 9:30. Woke up once around 1 a.m. because I thought I heard crunching footsteps nearby, but it might have been a raccoon or something. I sat up, listened for a bit. Didn't hear anything else, so I went back to sleep. The next morning, I was walking around the site brushing my teeth when I saw a trail camera nailed to a tree facing my tent. It was about chest height, strapped around the trunk tight, with a fresh-looking black nylon strap and a small metal lock on the side. It was pointing directly at my tent. Like, not even angled to catch a trail or the clearing. Just watching it. That tree hadn't had anything on it the day before. I was sure. I used that exact tree to tie off one side of my bear bag line. There's no way I would have missed it. It was a dark green camera, one of those compact ones. No stickers or labels. Just a little red light blinking every few seconds. I stood there for probably a full minute just staring at it. I felt this cold crawl on my chest, like my body knew something before my brain could catch up. The camera hadn't been there the day before, so someone had come by during the night. Close enough to my tent to install that without waking me up. I scanned the trees all around. I didn't see anyone. No movement. No sound. Just woods. I walked a wide circle around my site, trying to see if there were any tracks, but the ground was hard and dry. Nothing obvious. The only thing I found was this long, deep scratch on one of the trees near my food line, like someone had dragged something metal along the bark. I didn't touch the camera. I just packed up as fast as I could. Tent, bag, food, everything. Stuffed it all in, didn't even bother folding. I kept checking over my shoulder. That weird feeling, like I was being watched, got stronger with every minute. I hiked back toward the main trail, took a different way out than I'd come in. I tried to act casual in case someone was watching, like I was just heading out early, not scared or rushing. But inside I was panicking. The woods felt wrong. Not in a mystical way or anything like that, just off. Too quiet. Like the air had weight. Every few minutes I hear something behind me, not directly close, but like twigs snapping way off to the side. Never more than 1 or 2 snaps, never long enough to pin down a direction. I didn't stop. I didn't eat. I barely drank water. Just kept moving. I made it to the trailhead around 4 p.m. There were 2 cars in the lot besides mine, but both had been there when I arrived 2 days earlier. No fresh tracks in the dirt, no signs anyone else had come or gone. When I got to my car, I noticed the driver's side door was unlocked. I never leave it unlocked. I checked the back seat. Nothing missing. Nothing moved. Just unlocked. I got in and locked all the doors right away. Sat there for a minute trying to calm down. Then I noticed something. There was dirt on the inside handle. A smudge. Right where someone would grab to pull it closed. It wasn't mine. I hadn't opened that door since I'd parked. And the dirt was fresh. I drove straight home, for hours without stopping. When I got back, I couldn't stop thinking about the camera. I started checking hiking forums to see if anyone else had seen weird stuff on that trail, but there was nothing recent. Just the usual wildlife talk, gear reviews, people sharing sunrise photos. I even called the local ranger office. I didn't give my name, just said I'd seen a suspicious camera set up off one of the side trails and asked if that was legal. The guy I talked to sounded confused. He said trail cameras were allowed for hunters in certain areas, but only during season, and usually with ID or permit tags. I asked if they monitored who puts them up. He just said, "We don't track them unless there's a complaint." I thought about going back out there to take the camera down, but honestly I couldn't stomach the idea of being in those woods again. Not alone. About a week later, I went to unpack my bag fully and noticed something weird. Tucked into the bottom, in the compartment where I kept my socks, was a single pine cone. Not crushed. Perfectly intact. Not mine. I never collected pine cones. Never picked one up the entire trip. And it wasn't loose, it had been placed there, tucked between the roll pairs. I still have no idea how it got there. I haven't been back out since. It was a Thursday night. Nothing special. I was home alone because my girlfriend had gone to visit her sister for the weekend. She left that morning, and I had work during the day, then just came home, made dinner, watched a bit of TV. I wasn't drinking or anything. I was completely clear-headed. I remember tossing my keys onto the little dish we keep on the kitchen counter. I always do that. They make this loud clink that kind of bounces off the tile backsplash, so I know I've actually dropped them there without even looking. After dinner, I rinsed my plate, scrolled on my phone at the table for a bit, then got ready for bed around 10. Locked up everything, front door, back door, windows. We've got this little alarm panel near the garage door and I set it before heading to bed, same as always. We live in a quiet neighborhood, nothing sketchy, but still. Habit. I remember double-checking the front door because I'd read something about people using jammers or slipping in when you forget to deadbolt. I twisted the lock, pulled the door tight, gave it that little test pull just to be sure. I slept okay at first. Woke up once around 2 a.m. because I thought I heard something downstairs. Nothing loud. Just a small thump. But it was windy that night and sometimes the tree near the back porch scrapes the siding, so I figured it was that. I stayed in bed for a few minutes, listening, but there was nothing else. No footsteps, no creaks. Just normal house settling sounds. I didn't fall fully back asleep, though. I was sort of half awake for another hour, checking the time every so often, feeling this weird restlessness. I kept telling myself it was just because the bed felt too empty with my girlfriend gone. That happens sometimes. When I finally got up around 7:30, I came downstairs and went straight to the kitchen to make coffee. The tea dish was empty. At first I thought maybe I'd brought them into the living room by accident, or maybe left them in my jacket. I checked the coffee table, the couch cushions, the pockets of every jacket in the front closet. Nothing. I checked the bathroom, the bedroom, even the laundry hamper. I walked the whole house twice. I don't lose my keys. I just don't. They go in the dish. That's the routine. The only reason I found them at all was because I opened the front door to check if I'd somehow dropped them on the porch the night before. And there they were, sitting right in the center of the welcome mat. Neatly placed. Not dropped. Not scattered like someone had fumbled them. Just sitting there, as if someone had set them down on purpose. There was dew on the mat, but the keys were dry. Like they hadn't been there all night. Like someone had put them there early that morning. I just stood there staring at them for a few seconds, trying to make it make sense. Did I drop them outside and someone walking by found them and left them on the mat? But who does that without ringing the bell or knocking? I picked them up and immediately checked the locks again. Everything was still locked. The deadbolt was in place. The back door was latched. The windows were all still secure. Nothing looked broken or tampered with. I even checked the alarm history on the panel. It showed it had been armed at 10:13 p.m. and disarmed at 7:32 a.m. by me. just a few minutes earlier. No activity in between. I don't know how to explain it, but something about it just felt off. I told myself maybe I was tired and misplaced them, but I knew that wasn't true. And the way they were sitting lined up perfectly, keychain flat, not tangled, it was too neat. Too deliberate. I tried to brush it off, go about my day. I even went to work like normal, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about someone standing on the porch while I was asleep, quietly putting my keys down like they wanted me to know they'd been there. Like they wanted me to see them there. That night, I set the alarm again. Double-checked everything, same as the night before. But I was on edge. Around 1:45 a.m., I heard another noise downstairs. This time it was more of a soft scraping sound. Not the tree. Not the fridge cycling or the HVAC clicking. It sounded like something sliding across the floor. I got out of bed and stood at the top of the stairs. I didn't go down right away. Just listened. It stopped. Total silence. Then I heard this faint, rhythmic tapping. 3 soft taps, then a pause. Then again. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. The front of the house, maybe. But the sound was light enough that it could have been the back door, too. I grabbed my phone and opened the alarm app. No alerts. No doors or windows breached. Still armed. I stayed like that, just standing there, heart pounding, for maybe 15 minutes. The tapping eventually stopped. I didn't hear anything else. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to come up with some rational explanation. In the morning, I checked the porch again. No keys this time, but there was something else. A penny. Dead center of the welcome mat. Just one. Heads up. Clean, like it had been freshly placed. I don't carry change. I don't have loose pennies lying around. I use cards for everything. That was the moment I knew someone was screwing with me on purpose. I called the police, filed a report. They were polite but didn't have much to offer. No damage, no entry, no evidence of a crime, really. They suggested I get a camera. So I bought one of those doorbell cams that same day and had it set up by the evening. Nothing happened that night. Or the night after. I started to think maybe it was over. But then, Sunday morning, the doorbell camera sent me a motion alert at 4:17 a.m. I opened the clip and it was just empty. The porch was in view, but no one there. Nothing moving. No car lights, no wind. But there was a noise on the recording. Very faint. A low whisper. I played it back at full volume, held the phone to my ear. I couldn't make out the words. Just a whisper, like someone right up against the mic. Then silence. I downloaded the clip and brought it to the police. The officer who watched it with me didn't say much, just nodded and wrote something down. Said they'd do extra patrols in the area. I don't know if they actually did, but nothing else happened after that. It was a Tuesday, sometime last fall. I remember because it had just started getting dark earlier, and I was still working from home most days. Around 3:45 p.m., I heard the usual thump at the front door, a package drop. Nothing weird. I was expecting some stuff I'd ordered online, just boring household things. I didn't go out right away, just figured I'd grab it after I wrapped up a few emails. Half an hour later, I finally opened the door. There was a medium-sized brown box sitting on the welcome mat. My name was on it, but the street address underneath was wrong by one number, like off by a single digit. It said 1724 instead of 1725. Everything else, including the city and zip, was correct. I thought maybe a neighbor with a similar name lived over there, but when I walked across the street to double check, 1724 was just a plain white rental house that had been sitting empty for a couple months. I think the owners were trying to sell it. The grass was overgrown, mail stuffed in the box. No lights on, no cars in the driveway. I didn't even bother knocking. It was a little strange, but the box was addressed to me, and the contents matched what I ordered: toilet paper and a refill of allergy meds. Nothing that seemed worth screwing with. I figured maybe the driver just fat-fingered the label, or maybe the warehouse got the street number wrong when I typed it in. I didn't think much more about it. Just brought it inside, tossed the box in the recycling, and moved on with my day. That night was quiet. I made dinner, watched something on Netflix, then started getting ready for bed around 10. The house felt normal. Locked doors, windows closed, lights out. Sometime around 12:30, I heard a soft knock on the door. Not a loud pounding, just a slow, light tap. 3 times. I froze for a second. I live in a regular residential neighborhood, mostly families and retirees. Nobody knocks that late unless it's an emergency. I went over and peeked through the peephole. It was a man. Mid-30s maybe, wearing one of those reflective jackets like delivery people wear. He wasn't holding anything. Just standing there, hands at his sides, facing the door. He didn't knock again. Just stood there. I didn't say anything. I just kept watching. After maybe 30 seconds, he leaned toward the door slightly, like he was trying to listen. Then he looked over his shoulder real quick, then turned around and walked off the porch. I stayed at the peephole until he was gone, but I didn't see where he went. There was no vehicle on the street that I could see, and I didn't hear a car engine. I waited a few more minutes, then checked my phone. No new messages, no alerts from my doorbell cam. That was the weird part. The cam should have picked him up. It's not fancy or anything, but it catches every Amazon drop and even squirrels. I opened the app and refreshed the feed. Still nothing between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. The last motion it caught was me taking the trash out before dinner. The next morning, I pulled up the footage again just to be sure. Still blank. The timeline skipped right over that window of time, like it hadn't registered anything. I started to wonder if maybe I imagined it, maybe I dreamed it, or half woke up and thought I heard something. But I remember standing there, staring at that guy through the peephole. I remember the shape of his coat, the way he tilted his head. I didn't tell anyone. Just went through the day feeling unsettled. That night, I locked everything up tight again. Deadbolt, stick in the sliding door track, blinds closed. Left a light on in the kitchen. I went to bed a little early. Slept okay, at least for a few hours. Around 2:15 a.m., I woke up and had to pee. I got up, didn't turn on the lights, just used the faint glow from the hallway night light. On my way back to the bedroom, I passed by the front door, and something made me stop. The porch light was on, and through the frosted glass at the top of the door, I saw a shadow. Not moving. Just there. I held my breath. After a few seconds, I stepped back slowly, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I went to the side window, the one near the dining room, and carefully moved the curtain just a tiny bit. Same guy. He was standing on my porch again. Facing the door, still not knocking. Just standing there like he was waiting for something. This time, I could see him more clearly. Same reflective jacket, hands in his pockets. He looked like he was staring at the door, but his head was tilted slightly, like he was listening again. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He leaned forward and sniffed. Not loud, not exaggerated. Just this weird, deliberate little sniff, like he was smelling the crack of the door. Then he stepped back, turned, and walked across the lawn, not toward the street, but toward the side of the house. I moved fast. Locked myself in the bedroom, called 911. I kept my voice low and told the dispatcher there was a man on my property acting strange. They said officers were on their way. I stayed on the line, lights off, crouched in the closet. I didn't hear any glass break or doors open, but I kept imagining him at the back sliding door or crouched under a window. Cops showed up maybe 8 minutes later. They knocked, announced themselves. I let them in. They did a sweep of the property, didn't find anyone, but said they saw fresh footprints in the dirt along the side yard. One of them pointed out how close the prints got to the bedroom window. They asked if I recognized the guy. I said no, but mentioned the weird package incident and that he looked like a delivery driver. Then one of the cops asked, did he say anything when he came the first time? I told him no, but that he'd come back the next day. That's when the other officer, the younger one, raised his eyebrows. He came back. What for? I told him he didn't say anything either time, but I remembered something. A few hours before the second visit, maybe around 7 p.m., someone had rung the doorbell. I answered, and it was the same guy. I didn't recognize him then, I just thought he was a random driver doing late deliveries. He had a clipboard and a package in his hand. He asked, "Are you home alone right now?" Not "Do you live here?" Not "Can you sign for this?" Just, "Are you home alone right now?" I remember feeling thrown off, and I said, "Why?" And he just sort of smiled and said, "Sorry, wrong address," and walked off. That was the first time I saw him up close. It didn't click until after the nighttime visit that it was the same person. When I told the officers that part, they both got real quiet. The older one told me to get my locks rekeyed. The younger one said something like, "This kind of thing happens more than people think." They filed a report, took my doorbell cam footage, which again was blank for both visits. Like he knew exactly how to avoid it. After that night, I stayed with my brother for a week. Had the locks changed, installed motion lights, upgraded my security camera system with coverage on every side of the house. I never saw the guy again. But sometimes, if I'm up late and the porch light flickers, which it does every now and then, I find myself watching the shadow at the door a little too long. The Airbnb looked normal enough online. A small one-bedroom guest house behind someone's main home, listed as cozy, private, perfect for solo travelers. I booked it for 3 nights while I was in town for a work thing. The price was cheap, but not weirdly cheap, and the reviews were all positive. Said the host was friendly but kept to himself, and that the place was clean and quiet. That was all I really wanted. When I pulled up, the main house was up front, 2-story, with a wide porch and one of those wooden swings. The guest house was out back, like a converted garage with a little fence around it. It had its own entrance, a keypad lock, and a small gravel path running between the main house and the guest space. Nothing felt off. I only saw the host once in person, briefly, when I was getting out of my car. He stepped out onto his porch and gave a little wave. Middle-aged guy, gray beard, kind of heavy-set, wearing jeans and a hoodie. He said, "Let me know if you need anything," and that was it. Polite, but didn't linger. I liked that. The inside of the guest house was pretty basic. Queen bed, mini fridge, little kitchenette, desk. One big window over the desk that faced the backyard and part of the main house. The blinds were thin, but I didn't think much of it. I dropped my bag, answered a few emails, and then went out to grab dinner. When I came back around 8:30, the backyard was quiet and dark. I remember how still everything felt, no wind, no bugs buzzing. I let myself in, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the bed with takeout. There was a little TV mounted in the corner, so I put something on to make noise. That first night, nothing weird happened. I went to bed around 11. The mattress was a little stiff, but I slept okay. It was the second night that things started to feel off. I got back a little later, close to 10, and as I walked up the gravel path, I noticed one of the porch lights on the main house was still on. The host wasn't outside, but I thought I saw movement through the blinds, just a figure walking past a window. Whatever. People live their lives. When I opened the door to the guest house, though, I got this weird sense. Like something was just slightly out of place. Not obviously wrong, just off. I stood there a minute before stepping all the way in. Everything looked the same. My bag was where I left it. The TV was off. The window blinds were still drawn. I chalked it up to being tired. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth and noticed the hand towel was folded differently than I'd left it. I remembered using it earlier that morning and tossing it back on the rack kind of sloppily, but now it was folded neatly in half. I stood there staring at it for a bit. It didn't have to mean anything. Maybe I just remembered it wrong. Maybe the host came in to restock something and decided to straighten things up. Still, no one had mentioned anything about cleaning during the stay. No messages. Nothing in the listing about daily housekeeping. I texted the host just to ask, "Hey, did you come into the guest house today?" Just noticed the towel was folded different. He replied maybe 10 minutes later, "Nope, I don't go in during guest stays. Might have folded it that way yourself and forgot. Let me know if you need anything else." Okay. Fair enough. I left it alone, but I locked the door that night and double-checked the windows before bed. Around 3:20 a.m., I woke up for no obvious reason. Not a sound or a dream. Just suddenly awake. The room was quiet. Dark, except for a little glow from the digital clock on the nightstand. I laid there for a while, not moving, just listening. After a couple minutes, I heard something soft like gravel crunching outside. Not loud. Just one or two steps, then nothing. I sat up a little, heart going faster than it should have. The window over the desk didn't have blackout curtains, just cheap white blinds, and I realized I could see faint shadows through them. No shapes or movement, just that there was something breaking up the light from the yard. I moved to the edge of the bed slowly and kept staring at the window. I was about to get up and peek when I saw something that made me stop cold. A reflection. Faint, but clear. A face, lit just enough by the outside porch light. It was the host. Not directly in the window, but reflected in it. Like he was standing slightly off to the side. His head was tilted a little, and he wasn't moving. I stayed completely still. He didn't knock. Didn't say anything. Just stood there. After maybe 30 seconds, I slid off the bed as quietly as I could and crawled low toward the bathroom. From there, I could barely see the corner of the window. He was still out there. I grabbed my phone off the charger and took a picture through the blinds without opening them. It came out mostly black, but the flash caught a bit of glass and what looked like a forehead. I didn't try again. I didn't want to make noise. I texted the host. "Are you outside the guest house right now?" I waited. No reply. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Then the porch light clicked off. Just like that. I couldn't see anything now. I stayed in the bathroom another 10 minutes, trying to breathe normal. Eventually, I crept back to the window and peeked through the blinds. Nothing. The yard was empty. Gravel path untouched. Porch light still off. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I left the lights on and sat in the desk chair facing the door until the sun started coming up. Around 6:15, I packed everything, threw on my shoes, and booked it to my car. I didn't check out through the app or leave a note. I just drove. Later that afternoon, I got a message through the Airbnb app. "Hey, noticed you left early. Everything okay?" I didn't respond. I reported the stay to Airbnb with what happened, sent the picture, explained everything. They said they'd look into it. The listing stayed up for a while after that, but I noticed the host changed his profile picture. No more gray beard, now just a blank icon. A couple weeks later, out of curiosity, I checked the listing again. It was gone. The main house is still there, though. I checked on Google Maps. Street views from the summer before. You can see the swing on the porch. And if you zoom in real close, there's someone standing in the window of the guest house. Just barely visible. Might have been a glitch in the photo. Or maybe not. I live in this old apartment building downtown, the kind with creaky floors and a weird smell that never really goes away. The kind where you kind of expect stuff to be a little off because it's been around forever and the walls are thin as hell. I'm on the top floor 5th, no one above me, so when the noises started, it didn't make any sense. It started a few weeks after I moved in. I go to bed around midnight or so, and just as I was drifting off, I'd hear these footsteps. Not light, but slow and deliberate. Like someone was pacing. On hardwood. Directly above me. Thing was, there was no one above me. The ceiling was the roof. I checked with the landlord. He said no way anyone lived above. The attic was sealed off. No maintenance had been scheduled either. I told myself it was probably rats or something. Old buildings get critters. But rats don't sound like heavy boots or slow, measured steps. Rats run. These footsteps were careful, purposeful. The first night I heard them, I stayed awake listening. It was about 12:30 a.m., just after I turned off my light. The steps started soft and quiet, a couple across the ceiling, then a pause, then more. The sound wasn't random, there was a rhythm, like someone was walking back and forth, maybe 2 or 3 steps, then turning, then back again. I got up and looked out the window, thinking maybe someone was walking on the fire escape or something. But the fire escape was on the other side of the building, and I couldn't see anyone. I figured I was just tired and paranoid, but then it happened again the next night. And the night after that. Every time I went to bed, it started around the same time, somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m. The steps would last for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, sometimes longer. I started noticing other weird things, too. Like, I'd leave the apartment door locked, and in the morning, the lock looked scratched. Not deeply, but enough that you could tell something scraped it. I didn't hear any forced entry sounds, and nothing was missing. I kept checking windows, all locked. One morning I found my shoes moved from where I left them by the door. Not far, maybe a foot or 2 away. I don't know if I was sleepwalking, but I don't remember doing that. My phone would sometimes have weird static noises when I answered late at night, like someone breathing on the other end, but when I called back, no one answered. I started locking my bedroom door, even though it was just me in the apartment. I didn't want to feel exposed. I set my phone alarm to 12:30 a.m. one night, hoping to catch whoever it was. The steps started right on cue, slow and methodical, moving back and forth. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and got out of bed quietly. I moved to the living room ceiling, watching for anything. Nothing. Just silence except the footsteps. Then I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, a soft scraping, like fingernails or maybe a tool being dragged lightly across the plaster. It came from the ceiling right above me. I stayed frozen, heart pounding. The scraping stopped. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then from the hallway outside my door, I heard a faint creak. The door handle turned just a little, then stopped. I stood there in the dark for what felt like forever. No one came in. No one left. The next day, I called the landlord again and told him everything. He said he'd checked the attic and the roof. He said maybe someone was hiding up there or that rats might have made noises that sounded like footsteps. I wasn't convinced. 2 nights later, the steps started again. Only this time, they were louder, heavier, and closer to the middle of the ceiling. Then, for the first time, I heard a voice, a low whisper that sounded like someone saying my name. I swear I heard it, but it was so quiet I couldn't be sure. I locked my bedroom door, grabbed a kitchen knife from the drawer, and stayed awake, listening. The footsteps circled the room, slowed near the bedroom door, and then stopped. After a long pause, I heard the door handle jiggle, then a soft knock. Not loud enough for neighbors to hear, but clear in my silence. I whispered back, "Who is it?" No answer. I shouted, "Leave. I'm calling the cops." Nothing. I waited. The handle stopped moving. No footsteps. At dawn, I called the police. They came and checked the place thoroughly. No sign anyone had broken in. No footprints anywhere, no forced entry, no hidden spaces. The attic was empty and locked tight. No one had been inside. They said maybe it was an animal or a prank, but I didn't believe them. After that, I started staying at a friend's place some nights, but the steps still came when I was alone. I finally got a small security camera with motion detection and aimed it at my bedroom ceiling. The first night it recorded, I saw something on the footage that terrified me. Around 12:30 a.m., a shadow moved across the ceiling like a person's silhouette, except there was no one in the room when I looked. Then the camera recorded a hand reaching down, trying to turn the bedroom doorknob. I showed the footage to the police, but without any proof of forced entry. They said it was probably a trick of light or a technical glitch. One night, I stayed quiet in bed, phone ready to call if anything happened. The footsteps started, and I heard the scratching again, but this time, it moved from the ceiling to the wall next to my bed. I looked over, heart thudding, and saw scratch marks on the wall, fresh, like someone had been clawing at the paint. I grabbed my phone and called 911. I told them someone was trying to get into my room. While I was on the phone, I heard footsteps run down the hallway outside my door. Police arrived within minutes. This time, they found something. In the hallway, faint footprints in the dust, small and light but definitely there. They searched the building with flashlights and found a hidden crawl space behind a loose panel in the attic, just above my apartment ceiling. Inside was a small, dusty, cramped area. The landlord claimed he never knew about it. The police caught a guy hiding there. Turns out he'd been sneaking in through the roof vent, an old, unsecured ventilation shaft, and living in the crawl space for weeks. He'd been watching me, moving around above my ceiling, scratching at walls, even messing with my door. I moved out the next day. The landlord didn't press charges. I found out later the guy had a history of breaking and entering, and no fixed address. I still live alone, but now I triple check my locks, and I don't ever ignore strange noises at night. I never thought someone could be living right above me, hiding in a crawl space I never knew existed. It's crazy how close danger can be without you seeing it. There's this job I had for a few months at a small office, nothing fancy, just a regular weekday 9 to 5, filing papers, answering calls, that kind of thing. The office wasn't big, maybe 15 people, and I didn't really talk to most of them. Just enough to get by. One of the coworkers I barely interacted with was this guy, Eric. He kept to himself, kind of quiet, sat at the far end near the windows. I didn't have any reason to think about him much, honestly. But after a few weeks, I started noticing weird stuff. Little things first. Like, I'd be at my desk, and Eric would come over and say something oddly specific about my day, stuff I hadn't mentioned out loud or told anyone. One time, he just walked up and said, "So, you usually get here around 8:15, right? And then you get coffee from that corner cafe across the street." I blinked. I never said anything about where I get coffee, let alone the exact time I get in. I told him, "Yeah, that's right," trying to play it off like it was normal. He just smiled, said, "Figured as much." Then he walked away. That stuck with me. I started paying attention. The next day, he was at the printer when I went over. Without me saying anything, he said, "You take the same route to the printer every time. Left out of your cubicle, past the water cooler, then right." Which was true. I always went the same way, it was the shortest route. I felt a little uneasy but shrugged it off. Maybe he just noticed. Then things got weirder. I started realizing he was tracking more than just my work habits. Like, one afternoon, I got a text from my mom that she was bringing me lunch. Eric somehow knew before I even told anyone. He said, "Mom's bringing you a sandwich today. Turkey, right?" That freaked me out because I'd never talked about that lunch plan at work. I asked him how he knew, and he just said, "I pay attention." I told a couple of coworkers about it, and they laughed it off, saying Eric's just nosy or something. But it wasn't just curiosity. It was like he was silently following my every move. One day, I came in late. I had a dentist appointment, and I thought I was careful not to say anything. Yet when I got to my desk, Eric was there waiting, and he said, "Dentist, huh? That's why you were gone this morning." How did he know? I never told anyone. Nobody else knew either. That's when I started noticing other things, little odd moments that didn't add up. Like him always being near the elevator whenever I arrived or left, or him somehow knowing what I was having for dinner the night before, even though I never talked about my meals. It felt like he had access to my whole schedule. I started watching for him outside of work. Once, I spotted him near the coffee shop I go to in the morning. He was sitting outside, just staring at the door, like he was waiting for me. I ducked inside, hoping he wouldn't notice, but the whole time I was there, I felt eyes on me. It got worse when he started asking questions, not about work, but about me. Things like where I live, if I live alone, if I have family nearby. I was uncomfortable, so I kept it vague or changed the subject. One afternoon, after work, I was walking to my car in the parking lot. It was getting dark and quiet. I heard footsteps behind me, slow and steady. I looked back, and it was Eric. I didn't say anything, just kept walking. He matched my pace. I finally stopped and said, "What do you want?" He smiled, like it was a joke. "Just wanted to make sure you're okay. You look tired." I didn't feel comforted. I felt trapped. I told him, I'm fine. He didn't move, just stared. After that, I started leaving work later or taking longer routes to my car. I switched up my morning coffee spot, took different routes to work. But no matter what, Eric seemed to know. One morning, he was waiting at a different coffee shop down the block. He didn't say anything, just nodded. One day, I finally confronted him in the break room. "How do you know so much about me?" He shrugged like it was nothing. "You're predictable." I told him that made me uncomfortable and asked him to back off. He laughed and said, "Why? You're not doing anything interesting." That laugh didn't feel friendly. Then one night, I got a message from an unknown number. It said, "I see you." I didn't reply, but I knew it was Eric. I called HR and explained everything. They said they'd look into it, but Eric denied everything when they asked him. The next week, I started carrying pepper spray and kept my phone ready to call someone if he came near. I kept my blinds closed at home, locked every door twice. One day, I found a note slipped under my office door. It said, "Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere." That was enough. I quit. I told them it was for personal reasons. I moved far away after that. Changed my number. Took a new job. I don't know why Eric fixated on me. I never did anything to him. But I can't forget how he knew everything about my life, like he was there every moment I wasn't paying attention. I've never told anyone else the whole story. But if you ever have a coworker who knows too much, maybe don't ignore it. Because sometimes, it's not just curiosity. It's something else. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was checking my mailbox like I usually do, just bills and junk mostly, when I noticed something that wasn't there before. A phone, just sitting there between the flyers and bills. It was an old model, kind of scratched up, like someone tossed it aside but didn't want to lose it completely. I didn't want to be rude or break the law or whatever, so I grabbed it, figuring I'd try to find the owner or maybe turn it in. I unlocked it by accident because the screen lit up right when I picked it up. No passcode, no pattern, just right there, on the home screen. What I saw next made my stomach drop. There was a folder called Me, and inside it were dozens of photos. All of me. Taken from behind, mostly. Walking down the street, getting into my car, standing outside my apartment, sometimes just sitting on the bench at the park nearby. The pictures were from different days, different times. Some from early morning, some at night, one even from the grocery store parking lot. The weird part? They all looked like they were taken from a distance, like someone was hiding behind a tree or a parked car, snapping photos without me knowing. I checked the timestamps on the pictures. They matched days from the past month. I hadn't noticed anyone following me. I mean, I'm not paranoid, but if someone was trailing me that long, I thought I'd have seen them. I put the phone back in the mailbox and went inside, trying to act normal, but my mind was spinning. Who was doing this? Why? And how the hell did they get so close without me noticing? That night, I kept looking out my window, half expecting to see someone lurking nearby. The street was quiet, the only sounds were cars passing and a dog barking somewhere down the block. I told myself I was imagining things. I went to bed. The next day was worse. I noticed subtle things, little things that didn't add up. Like the mailman dropping the mail later than usual. Or hearing footsteps outside when I was sure no one else was around. One time, I caught a glimpse of someone across the street standing perfectly still behind a bush. When I looked again, they were gone. I started changing my routine. I took different routes to work. I stopped going to the park in the evenings. I left my car in the garage instead of the street. But it didn't matter. Every time I checked the phone, there were more pictures. New ones. Like someone was watching, day after day, waiting for the right moment. One afternoon, I got brave and answered a call on the phone. No one spoke. Just silence, then a click and the line went dead. I started leaving the phone on the kitchen counter, hoping whoever was watching would get the message. Nothing happened for days. Then came the note, folded inside the phone case. It said, "I see you." My hands were shaking when I read it. The message was clear. Someone was stalking me, taking pictures, following me, knowing where I was at all times. I called the police, gave them the phone and the note. They said they'd investigate, but with no clear suspects or witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. So I started carrying pepper spray. I got a security camera for my front door. I told my closest friends what was going on. They tried to convince me it was probably a prank or some creep would get bored, but I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. One night, I heard my front door open. I froze. No one should be there. I peeked through the peephole but saw nothing. When I opened the door, the phone was on the welcome mat, screen cracked this time. The last photo saved on it was of me, standing just inside the doorway. That was enough. I packed a bag that night and left. Stayed with a friend out of state while I figured out what to do. I never found out who it was or why they targeted me. But sometimes, when I think about those photos, all taken without me noticing, I remember how small and exposed I felt. Like someone had been tracing my life's footsteps without permission. I don't go to that neighborhood anymore. And I never leave my mailbox unattended. There was a stretch of maybe 2 weeks where this really strange thing started happening with my landline phone. I live alone in a small house, pretty quiet neighborhood, not much traffic or noise at night. My phone's mostly just for bills or the rare call from family or a friend. But then, one night, it rang around midnight. I didn't recognize the number, but it was a blocked one, like it was coming from someone who didn't want to show their caller ID. When I picked up, there was nothing but this really quiet whisper on the other end. Not just random noise, but whispering something I couldn't catch right away. I thought it was a prank at first, so I hung up. Next night, same time, the phone rings again. Blocked number. This time, I held on longer, trying to make out what they were saying. It wasn't a word I heard often, but it felt familiar in a weird way. Then it hit me, they were whispering my childhood nickname. The one only a handful of people called me, like when I was a kid in close family or my best friend from back then. No one else in my current life knew it. I froze for a second, heart beating faster than it should have been. Who the hell knew that? Who was calling me? And why whisper it like that? I didn't say anything, just waited for them to speak more, but the line went dead. The next few days, the calls kept coming. Sometimes just the whisper of that nickname, sometimes silence, sometimes what sounded like soft breathing. I didn't answer anymore. I just stared at the phone when it rang, my hand shaking, trying to figure out if it was some kind of sick joke or something worse. It wasn't just the calls. I started noticing small things too. Like, my front door would be slightly ajar when I got home from work, but I'm sure I locked it. My porch light sometimes flickered on and off, even though the bulb was new. One night I heard footsteps just outside my window, slow, careful, like someone was pacing. I looked out, but nothing. Just the empty street, the old oak tree casting shadows. One afternoon, I found my mailbox open, even though I always close it. No sign of anything stolen, just open. It felt like someone was testing the boundaries, watching to see how I'd react. I told one of my coworkers about the calls, and they joked maybe it was some stalker X or a prank, but I knew it wasn't that simple. I hadn't talked to anyone from my past for years. No recent drama or fights. And the nickname thing? That was private, only from when I was a kid, long before anyone I worked with even met me. The calls started getting worse, coming earlier in the evening and sometimes right after I just hung up. Once, the whisper wasn't just my nickname, it was my full first name, spoken slow and deliberate, like they were right next to the phone. I swear I could almost hear breathing, heavy and close. One night, I stayed up waiting for the call. When it came, I answered. Whispered, "Hey, my nickname, you remember me?" I didn't say a word. My mouth went dry. I tried to stay calm, but the voice on the other end was so familiar. I wanted to recognize it, but couldn't place it. Then they said, "I'm closer than you think." I hung up and locked every door and window in the house. Pulled the blinds tight. Sat in the dark for hours, listening. The street was silent except for the occasional car driving by far away. That was when I found a note slipped under my front door. Just one sentence, written on plain white paper in messy handwriting. "You can't hide my nickname." I called the police and showed them the note, told them about the calls and the weird stuff happening around the house. They said they'd patrol the area more, but there wasn't much evidence to go on. No one had seen anyone suspicious. The neighborhood was quiet, people kept to themselves. I tried to sleep in my bedroom that night, but I couldn't. Every creak and groan of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow seemed to move. So I stayed in the living room with a baseball bat and my phone, waiting for something to happen. The calls finally stopped after that night. No ring, no whisper, no breathing on the line. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside my space, watching me, knowing things I shouldn't have shared with anyone anymore. I moved out of the house a month later. Took the whole weekend, packed up everything, and didn't look back. I didn't tell anyone where I went or why, just said I needed a fresh start. No calls followed me. No whispers on the phone. Sometimes I wonder who it was. Someone from my past. Someone who'd been watching all along. But I don't want to find out. I don't want to hear that nickname again, whispered from a blocked number in the dead of night. I was working late one night, just like a lot of times before. It was maybe close to 11 p.m., and the office was basically empty except for me. Everyone else had long gone home hours earlier, which was normal for those late shifts I volunteered for sometimes. I liked the quiet. I could get through my reports without interruptions. The office building was one of those old ones with a long hallway running down the middle, lined with offices on either side. The lights there were motion activated. The idea was to save energy, but sometimes they flickered or turned off and on at weird times. Usually nothing to worry about. I was sitting at my desk near the end of the hallway, working on some spreadsheets when I noticed the lights in the hallway ahead flick on. It was odd because I was the only one there. I glanced up and down the hallway, no sign of anyone else. I thought maybe it was a glitch or the sensor was just extra sensitive. A minute later, the lights flicked off. Then, a few seconds later, they popped back on again. I figured maybe some small bug or bird had flown past the sensor outside the window at the end of the hall. It was a little unsettling, but I shook it off. After a while, I needed a break. I got up, stretched, and decided to walk down the hall to get a drink from the water cooler near the exit. As I walked, the lights were steady on, but as soon as I passed under one sensor, it went dark behind me. The next sensor flicked on as I moved past it. That's when I noticed something weird. The light at the far end of the hallway, near the main exit, turned on. But that part of the building was supposed to be locked down tight at night, and no one was supposed to be there. I slowed down, stopped, and looked toward the end of the hall. The lights stayed on for a few seconds, then went off again. I felt that sudden prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I kept walking, telling myself I was just being paranoid. The building was old, the sensors probably just needed fixing. I got my water, turned around, and headed back. But then the lights near my office started flickering on and off again. I stopped at my door, leaned against the wall, and looked down the hall toward the exit. The lights near the end turned on and stayed on for a long time, then slowly went off. I checked my watch. No one else was supposed to be in the building at this hour. The security guard had already left for the night. I tried calling him on his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I started feeling really uncomfortable. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, maybe a maintenance guy or someone who forgot their keys. But no one had said anything about working late or being around. I thought about calling the front desk or building management, but figured it'd take too long, and I wanted to get out of there sooner than later. I decided to finish my work quickly and leave. A little later, I was back at my desk, trying to focus, when I heard a soft noise like footsteps. Not the kind of echo you get in an empty building, but distinct steps. Slow, deliberate. I froze, listening. The footsteps were coming from down the hall, moving closer to where I was. I tried telling myself it was just my imagination or maybe a cleaning crew that had come back. But I'd been watching the hallway lights the whole time, and none of the sensors had triggered. The footsteps stopped right outside my office door. I held my breath. After what felt like forever, I heard a faint scrape like someone dragging something heavy. Then silence. I didn't move for a moment, waiting to see if anything else happened. The lights in the hall went dark, then suddenly flicked back on. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving at the far end of the hallway, just beyond the doorway of the last office. I squinted, trying to make out details, but it was too dark to tell who or what it was. I didn't want to move and risk whatever it was noticing me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down and saw a text from an unknown number. "Why are you alone?" My hands shook. I didn't reply. I put the phone face down on the desk. The shadow was gone when I looked back up. I started packing my stuff fast, heart pounding. I wanted to leave right then, but something made me hesitate, the feeling that if I rushed, I'd alert whoever was there. So I kept calm, moved slowly. Just as I stood up, the office door handle started to turn slowly, the door creaking open. I grabbed a chair and shoved it under the handle. The door didn't budge. I pulled my phone out and dialed 911. My voice was low, trying not to give away my panic. I told the operator I was locked in the office alone and someone was trying to get in. The operator told me police were on the way and to stay quiet. The footsteps outside my door started pacing, slow steps back and forth. I could hear breathing through the crack under the door. Minutes felt like hours. I whispered to myself to stay calm. Then the footsteps moved away, down the hall, fading into silence. I stayed put until I heard sirens outside. The cops came in, searched the building, but found no one. No sign of forced entry. They asked if I knew anyone who might want to scare me, but I didn't. I told them about the lights turning on by themselves, the footsteps, the text message. They said they'd increase patrols and keep an eye on the building. I quit that job a week later. Even after I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside the building with me that night, watching and waiting. Not some glitch or accident, someone who knew exactly when I'd be alone, and wasn't afraid to let me know. I was driving home late one night from a friend's place way out in the sticks. The kind of place where streetlights are just a rumor, and your phone decides it's better off offline. I remember it was past midnight, and I was the only car on this long stretch of country road that cut through fields and thick woods. No houses in sight, just the occasional barn or a rundown fence line. The whole drive was quiet except for the hum of my tires on the asphalt and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. My phone screen kept flashing no service, which wasn't a surprise, but it still made me feel kinda uneasy. I didn't really know the area well. I'd taken this road because my GPS said it was faster, but now I was wishing I hadn't. Then, out of nowhere, I saw him. A man standing right in the middle of the road, dead still, just staring at my headlights. It was one of those moments where you slam on the brakes, and the car almost skids before coming to a stop a few feet away from him. I didn't even think to honk or anything, it just felt wrong. Like messing with him would only make it worse. The guy didn't say anything. He just stood there, arms hanging loose, head tilted slightly. He was wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, but I couldn't make out his face clearly, just a vague shape in the shadows. The thing was, it wasn't just a quick stop to check if he'd move. He stayed there, like a statue, not even blinking. I glanced at my phone again. No signal. No way to call anyone. My heart was pounding harder now. I tried to inch forward slowly, expecting him to jump out of the way. But nope. Nothing. He just stayed. That's when I noticed something else. He wasn't alone. Off to the side of the road, just beyond the reach of my headlights, I saw a shadow slip between the trees. Another figure, but this one moved faster, more deliberate. I couldn't tell if they were watching me or just passing by, but it made my skin crawl. I locked my doors and rolled up the windows, but the man in the road didn't budge. I tried calling 911, but the phone showed no service again. I was stuck there, stuck with this guy who refused to move. After what felt like forever, I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Not in the way you'd expect someone cold or scared to shake, but like he was nervous, maybe trying to work up the courage to say something. I swallowed hard and cracked the window just an inch. My voice was barely a whisper when I said, "Hey, do you need help?" He didn't answer. Just tilted his head a bit more and took a slow step forward. That's when I caught a glimpse of his face. It was pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and he looked exhausted. But what really threw me was the tiny cut on his cheek, fresh and bleeding a little. I was about to ask if he was hurt when he suddenly muttered something that made my blood run cold. "You shouldn't be here." The hairs on my neck stood up. I locked the window back up and pressed the gas pedal gently. The man didn't move again, but I felt like he was watching me, like he'd somehow know if I left without his permission. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a split second, I thought I saw him raise a hand, maybe waving. Or maybe something else. I can't explain it. I sped off down the road, eyes darting between the dark trees on both sides, hoping no one else was lurking in the shadows. When I finally got to a main road with streetlights and a steady phone signal, I called the cops. They said they'd send someone to check the area, but when I gave them the location, they sounded skeptical, like no one reported anything. That night, driving home through nowhere, with a man standing like a ghost in the road and no way to call for help, felt like the closest I ever came to real fear. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I've never taken that route again. I moved into my new apartment in the city in early fall. It was one of those older buildings with creaky floors and tiny rooms, but it was close to work and the rent was decent, so I took it. Nothing fancy, just me and a fresh start. The first few days were mostly unpacking and figuring out where everything went. The bedroom was small, with a big window that looked out over the street. The closet was narrow but deep, with one of those sliding doors that always felt a little stiff. I kept my clothes on one side and left the other half mostly empty. A week or so in, I was just about done settling in. It was late, maybe around 11 p.m., and I was getting ready for bed. I pulled open the closet door to grab my pajamas. That's when I noticed it, clothes hanging next to mine. Not mine. Different. It caught me off guard because I didn't remember putting anything else in there. I was positive the closet had been empty except for my stuff when I moved in. These weren't just a few random pieces either. There was a jacket, a couple of shirts, and some pants. They were clean but looked worn, like someone had used them regularly. I froze for a second, just staring at the clothes. I figured maybe the previous tenant forgot something, but the landlord hadn't mentioned any lost items. I even remembered checking the closet during the walkthrough. It was empty. I pulled the clothes out carefully and looked them over. Nothing too strange on their own, but one of the shirts had a faint smell, not a bad one, but definitely not laundry detergent. More like sweat mixed with something else, maybe smoke. I put the clothes in a plastic bag and locked them in the bathroom cabinet, thinking I'd deal with them later. That night, I kept hearing noises, little creaks and thumps, like someone moving around in the apartment. I live alone, so I'm used to some sounds, but these felt different, like footsteps, soft but deliberate, coming from the closet. I told myself it was just the building settling or maybe my imagination. The next day, I asked the landlord if anyone else had a key to my apartment. He said no, only him and the maintenance guy, and he'd never come in without letting me know. Still, the thought that someone could have been inside while I was out made my stomach twist. A few nights later, I was sitting on the couch watching TV when I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked toward the bedroom. The closet door was slightly open. I was sure I'd closed it. I got up and shut it firmly, then double-checked the lock on the front door. Everything was normal, but my skin was crawling. I decided to leave the apartment door unlocked while I was inside, just in case. Over the next few days, I noticed small things out of place. A drawer half open that I swore I'd closed, my shoes not where I left them, and once, I found a faint footprint on the kitchen floor that wasn't mine. I tried to convince myself I was just tired or absent-minded, but deep down, I knew something was off. One evening, I was brushing my teeth before bed when I heard the closet door creak open slowly. I dropped my toothbrush and froze. I stood there in the dark bathroom, listening. Nothing else happened, but I didn't want to turn around. I grabbed my phone and called the landlord. He was out of town but said he'd send the maintenance guy over the next day to check the locks and windows. When the maintenance guy arrived, he was calm and polite but looked surprised when I showed him the closet. He checked the lock and sliding door mechanism and said everything was working fine. I asked if he ever heard of anyone sneaking into apartments around here. He shrugged and said the building was old, and sometimes people broke in, but usually they just wanted easy targets. That night, I stayed up with the lights on, phone in hand. I thought maybe if someone tried to get in again, I'd be ready. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft shuffling from the bedroom. My heart jumped. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept down the hall. The living room was empty, the bedroom door closed. I slowly opened the bedroom door and saw the closet door halfway open. The clothes I'd put away the week before were still in the bathroom cabinet, so whoever it was had access to the apartment and the closet. I stepped closer, trying to control my breathing. Then I heard a soft sigh, like someone exhaling quietly. I wasn't alone. Suddenly, the closet door slid open all the way. A man stepped out. He wasn't big, maybe mid-30s, wearing a hoodie and jeans. His eyes were dark and tired but fixed on me like I was the intruder. I screamed and backed out of the room, calling 911 on the way. He didn't chase me, just stood there, watching. The police arrived quickly. The man was arrested. Turns out he'd been squatting in the apartment, hiding in the closet for days, coming and going when I wasn't home. He'd stolen a key and made a habit of sneaking in, maybe waiting for a chance to confront me or take something. They said it wasn't the first time something like this happened in old buildings around there. I stayed with a friend for a while after that and eventually moved. I still check my closet every time I go home, just to be sure. I never really thought about how often I went to that grocery store until it started feeling like someone else knew my schedule better than I did. It was the one near my place, the kind with the old, flickering fluorescent lights, the slightly sticky floors, and that weird smell you don't notice at first but eventually just accept as normal. I liked going there because it was small, quietish, and close enough to walk if I felt like it. I usually went late afternoon or early evening, just grabbing whatever I needed for the next day or two. The first time I noticed something was off, I thought it was nothing. I was in the produce aisle picking out some apples when I caught a glimpse of this guy out of the corner of my eye. He was standing a few rows over, looking like he was just browsing, but he wasn't really. His eyes were kind of fixed on me. Not in a glaring way, more like a quiet, steady watching. I looked away quickly and turned around, and he moved too, nothing crazy, just shifting his position like he was trying to stay where he could see me without being obvious. I figured maybe it was a coincidence. People shop in the same places, it happens. But then the same thing happened the next time I went there, a few days later. Different time, same store. I saw him again, same guy, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. I kept my distance, tried to keep track of him, but every time I turned a corner, he was there, just keeping pace, but not close enough to say something or confront me. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe the guy was a regular who just happened to be shopping at the same time. The grocery store's aisles aren't huge, and sometimes you cross paths with the same people. Still, my stomach tightened every time I walked in. After a week of this, I started noticing little things that made me uneasy beyond just seeing him. Like, the overhead announcements over the speaker would pause awkwardly, or the music would cut out for a moment when I was in certain parts of the store. At first, I thought it was just bad wiring or some maintenance issue, but it always happened around the time I caught sight of that guy. One evening, I went to grab some milk and eggs. The store was almost empty, just me and one other shopper, which was the guy again. I tried to ignore him, but he started following me in a way that didn't even try to hide. He would be 2 or 3 aisles away, but moving the same direction I was going, stopping when I stopped, keeping that same low, steady gaze. I could feel it on my back like a weight. I checked my phone to see the time, just to distract myself. That's when I noticed the store's automatic doors open behind me, and someone stepped inside. Not the guy, someone else. It was a woman with a hoodie. She looked around, then walked straight toward the front registers, but stopped and turned, watching me. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't just being followed by one person anymore. I hurried through the checkout line, my hand shaking a bit as I scanned my items. The guy was still behind me, 2 people in front in the line, but I could see him in the reflection of the glass cooler doors. His face was unreadable, but his eyes never left me. When I left, I looked back through the sliding doors, and he was standing just inside, still watching. That's when I felt it for the first time, the kind of helplessness that sinks in when you realize you're being tracked, like a trap closing around you and there's no easy way out. After that night, I started changing my schedule, visiting the store at different times, hoping it was a coincidence, hoping I'd never see him again. But no matter where I went, he showed up. Sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but always there. I tried taking different routes inside the store, going in through the back entrance, even switching stores for a while. But he always found me, sometimes even ahead of me, waiting by an aisle or near the registers. I told a few friends, but they thought I was overreacting or imagining it. Maybe he's just shopping too, they said, but I could tell from their faces they didn't really believe me. I wasn't the kind of person who made things up or looked for trouble. One night, it got worse. I was about to leave, walking to my car in the parking lot, when I noticed a figure standing near the far end, in the shadows under a broken streetlight. It was him again. He didn't move when I looked at him, just stood there, watching. I felt like I was trapped, the kind of panic where your brain knows you need to run, but your body is frozen, stuck on the spot. I locked my car door and started it, keeping my eyes on him through the windshield. He didn't come closer, but he didn't leave either. I called a friend to come get me. She arrived in a few minutes, and I got in the passenger seat without saying a word. We drove around the block to see if he was still there, but he was gone. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting him to be following us in some other car. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise outside sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like him waiting to come inside. I kept the lights on until dawn and then finally drifted off, exhausted and on edge. The next day, I decided to go to the police. I told them everything, the repeated sightings, the parking lot, the way he watched me. They took notes, said they'd patrol the area more, but I knew they couldn't do much without catching him in the act. After that, I started bringing my phone out and recording every time I saw him. Sometimes he noticed and looked directly at the camera, which made my skin crawl. One day, the store security guard stopped me and asked what I was doing. I told him about the guy, showed him the videos, and for a moment, I thought something might finally change. The guard told me they'd been aware of a suspicious person hanging around but never had proof or complaints. They said they'd increased their presence in the parking lot and near the entrances. It helped a little, but the guy didn't disappear. He just got more careful, more subtle. Sometimes I'd see him standing behind a pillar or hiding by a shelf, watching. One time, I was checking out with groceries when I noticed him standing at the end of the aisle. I grabbed my bags and walked fast, but then I saw him pull out a phone and point it at me, like he was taking a picture or video. I didn't stop to see. I just laughed. Eventually, I started going to a different store miles away. It was out of the way, but I didn't care. At least there, I didn't feel like I was being hunted. I never saw him again after I stopped going to the old store. No more glimpses, no watching eyes. I changed my routines, stopped walking alone at night, and always checked my surroundings. The whole thing messed with me more than I wanted to admit, made me feel small and exposed in a world where you think you're just another face in the crowd, but someone else is picking you out like a target. I still shop at that new store now, but sometimes, when I'm in the parking lot or the aisles, I look over my shoulder, just in case. I never really thought much about video calls. I mean, they're just like talking on the phone, but you can see the other person. I usually use them to keep in touch with my friends, especially since we all lived in different cities. One night, though, I had a call that ended up being way more unsettling than any horror movie. I was in my apartment, just sitting on the couch with my laptop on my lap. It was late, maybe around 10 p.m. on a weeknight, and I was catching up with my friend Jess. We hadn't talked for a while, so it was just a casual thing. The room was quiet except for our voices and the occasional car driving by outside. We were chatting about random stuff, work, plans for the weekend, and then Jess mentioned some weird noises she'd been hearing in her new apartment. I laughed and said I hadn't noticed anything strange where I lived. My place was pretty old and creaky sometimes, but nothing serious. Then, out of nowhere, Jess's screen froze. Her face just stayed there, mid-sentence, mouth open, eyes wide. I thought maybe her internet was laggy, so I waited. A few seconds later, the video unfroze and she looked straight at me with this terrified expression. "There's someone standing behind you," she said in this low, urgent voice. The weird thing was, her eyes weren't flicking to check the background or anything. She was just staring right at me. I immediately turned my head. Nothing. Just the empty living room behind me, the dim lamp on the side table, the kitchen doorway in the back. I even stood up and walked around, checking all the corners, but the place was empty. When I turned back to the screen, Jess's call had disconnected. The app closed like she'd hung up suddenly. I sat there frozen for a minute, heart thumping. My hands felt clammy, and every sound in the room seemed louder than before. The hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, even the creak of the floorboards under my feet. I called her back right away, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted, but no reply. I tried calling a few more times, and nothing. I thought maybe it was just a weird glitch or something. Maybe Jess was playing a prank, though the tone in her voice didn't sound like a joke. I closed my laptop and walked to the front door, locking it behind me, double-checking the deadbolt. That's when I noticed something odd. My back window was cracked open. I was pretty sure I'd shut it earlier that evening. I always made sure to lock the windows before settling in for the night. I slammed it shut and locked it tightly, then went back to my living room. I kept checking behind me, peeking over my shoulder every few seconds, even though I told myself there was nothing there. I didn't sleep well that night. Every little noise made me jump. Around 2 a.m., I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment door. I froze, listening. It stopped as soon as I stopped moving. The next morning, I asked my neighbor if they'd seen anyone around the building late at night. They said no, but they mentioned that a few weeks ago, someone tried to open my door but ran off when they heard footsteps coming down the hall. I called the police and reported the window, the footsteps, everything. They came by, took some pictures, and said they'd patrol the area more often. I stayed with a friend for a couple of nights after that. Jess finally messaged me 2 days later, saying her internet had been acting up and she was sorry for freaking me out. But the thing is, she didn't remember saying that or anything about someone behind me. She thought it was her imagination or a bad connection. I still don't know what was really going on that night. But after that, I made sure to lock every window and door, even during the day. And I never let my laptop camera point anywhere but at me when I'm home alone. I don't know how to start this without sounding crazy, but it happened exactly like this. I woke up one night to the smell of something cooking. It wasn't just some random burnt toast or microwave leftovers. It was this strong, unmistakable smell of onions and garlic frying, like someone was making a real meal. I live alone, and my front door was locked, deadbolt and all. I always lock it before bed. I'm pretty careful about that kind of stuff. So when I caught the smell drifting from the kitchen, my first thought was that maybe I'd left something on the stove earlier, but I'm not the type to do that. I'm careful about cooking, especially late at night. Still groggy, I pulled the covers off and sat up. The kitchen light was off, and everything looked normal, but the smell was definitely there, strong enough that I could almost hear the sizzle. I tried shaking it off, thinking maybe I was dreaming or it was coming from somewhere else, like a neighbor's apartment or something. But this was too real, too close. I got out of bed and walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, keeping quiet because I wasn't sure what I'd find. My phone was on the charger by the bed, and I thought about grabbing it, but I wanted to figure out what was going on first. When I peeked around the corner into the kitchen, nothing was on the stove. The burners were all off, and the counters were clean, like I hadn't cooked anything in hours. No pans, no pots, no smell coming from a burner. The fridge was closed tight. I opened it, checking just in case someone had turned something on, but no. Everything was exactly how I left it. That's when my skin started crawling. The smell wasn't fading. It was stronger. And I realized it was coming from somewhere else in the kitchen. I scanned the room and saw the toaster oven on the counter. I opened it and it was cold and empty. No smell. I started to get that weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I was being watched or something was off in a way I couldn't explain. The kitchen was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge. Then I noticed something else. The back door, the one that leads to the small yard, was locked tight like always. I double-checked the front door too. Deadbolt and chain both in place. No signs of forced entry anywhere. I wanted to tell myself it was just my imagination, but then I saw it, a single frying pan sitting on the floor near the trash can. It wasn't there the night before, and I never put a pan on the floor. It was a cheap pan, the kind I use sometimes, but still. Why would it be there? I picked it up and checked if it was warm or greasy. It was cold and clean, but that smell of onions and garlic stuck in the air like smoke. I called out softly, "Hello," but only my voice answered me back. No footsteps, no sounds from outside. I took the pan to the sink and rinsed it, then put it back on the stove. I checked every window in the apartment, even the ones that are too high to reach easily. Locked tight. No open windows anywhere. Still, the smell lingered. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a faint trail of tiny smudges on the kitchen floor, like someone had walked through with dirty shoes. The smudges led from the back door, across the kitchen, and ended near the stove. I grabbed my phone and called my best friend, Mark, who lived nearby. I told him what was going on, and he said he'd be over in 10 minutes. I didn't want to wait alone. While I waited, I sat in the living room with the lights on, the TV playing at a low volume. I kept glancing toward the kitchen door, half expecting someone to step through. Every noise sounded too loud, the creak of the pipes, the buzz of the light fixtures, even my own breathing. Mark arrived just as I was about to text him to come faster. When he came in, I showed him the pan, the smudges, and told him about the smell. He checked the doors and windows himself, saying everything was secure, but I could see he didn't look totally convinced. We both stood in the kitchen, eyes darting around. Mark joked that maybe it was a prank by some neighbor, or I'd been sleepwalking and cooking in my sleep, but I knew I hadn't. Then, while we were standing there, Mark's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and suddenly his face went pale. He showed me the text. It was from an unknown number and said only one thing: "You're not alone." My heart stopped. Mark looked at me, eyes wide. We both heard it then, a soft thump coming from the hallway closet. The door was closed, but that sound was unmistakable. Mark pulled out his pocket knife, and I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the shelf. We approached the closet slowly, the smell of frying onions still thick in the air. Before we opened the door, the thumping stopped. I reached out and pulled the handle. The door creaked open, and inside was nothing. Just coats hanging on the rack, some boxes on the floor, and my vacuum cleaner. We looked closer and found footprints on the carpet leading to the closet and back out again. The footprints didn't match mine or Mark's shoes. We decided not to stick around. Mark called the police. They came, checked everything, and said no one was in the apartment. They took pictures of the footprints and the smudges, but since no one was found, they said it might be some prank or a homeless person sneaking in. I spent the night at Mark's place. The next morning, I went back to my apartment with the locks changed and a security camera installed inside and out. The smell never came back. I never found out who or what caused it. But every time I walk past the kitchen, I still get that strange feeling, like someone's watching me just beyond the edge of my sight. I went to see an apartment last week. It was listed online, and the price seemed decent for the area. I'd been looking for a while, and this one was in a good neighborhood. It was a sunny afternoon when I arrived, and everything seemed normal. The address checked out, and the building was in decent shape. The landlord, or the man who claimed to be, greeted me outside. He looked just like someone you'd expect, mid-40s, a bit disheveled, wearing a worn-out jacket. He had a friendly enough smile, though something about him felt off. Not in a way that screamed danger, just a subtle discomfort that I couldn't place. But I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured maybe I was being paranoid. We went inside, and he showed me around. The apartment itself wasn't anything fancy, but it was decent. It had good space, lots of natural light coming through the windows, and the rent was affordable for the area. I was feeling pretty good about it, despite the nagging feeling in my stomach. As he walked me through the rooms, he kept talking. A lot. A little too much, honestly. He mentioned things about the building's history, the previous tenants, and how he keeps it in good shape. Nothing too weird at first. But then, he started talking about the neighborhood more. A bit too much. Like he was trying to convince me it was the perfect place to live. The more he talked, the more I felt that strange unease creeping in. I tried to stay polite, listening while I thought about whether I really wanted this place. But by the time we got to the kitchen, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't sure yet. I needed time to think. I couldn't just make a decision like that. Thanks for showing me around, I said, glancing toward the door. I think I need some time to think about it. I'll let you know later. The moment I said that, I saw something shift in his face. It wasn't obvious, but there was a change. His eyes tightened, his smile faded just a little. Of course. But you're sure you want to think it over? It's a great deal. It'll go fast, he said, the tone in his voice suddenly colder than before. I wasn't sure why, but I started feeling like I was being cornered. Not physically, but mentally. He was blocking the doorway now, standing between me and the exit. I felt a sudden rush of panic, but I didn't want to seem rude. Maybe I was overreacting, right? I just want to be sure. I've looked at a lot of places, I said, trying to stay calm. He nodded but didn't move. For a second, it felt like he wasn't going to let me leave. That's when I noticed his eyes. Something about them was different now. They were more focused, almost too focused, like he was studying me. Take your time, of course. But, he said, stepping a little closer to me, sometimes it's better to make a decision right away, before someone else gets to it. I didn't like the way he said that. I started to feel trapped. The hallway behind him, the exit door, was too far now. He was still blocking it. I felt a tightening in my chest, like I couldn't breathe properly. "I think I'll step out for a bit," I said, my voice shaking just a little. "I'll call you later." I tried to move around him, but he didn't step aside. He was still in my way, looking at me too intently. "Are you sure?" His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent. "It's such a nice apartment. I'm sure you'll love it here." I couldn't tell if I was imagining it, but there was something in his gaze that made me think this wasn't about the apartment anymore. It felt like something else. Something that wasn't right. I tried to walk around him again, a little more forcefully this time, but he didn't move. "Hey," I said, my voice louder, trying to keep control. "Please let me go." "I'll let you know later." For a second, it was like he was going to say something else. His eyes flickered briefly, and I thought I saw a flash of frustration. Then he stepped back, just enough for me to slip by. I didn't wait to see what he was going to do next. I walked out as quickly as I could, closing the door behind me a little too forcefully. I could still hear his voice faintly, something like "take care" or "we'll be in touch," but I didn't want to turn around to make sure. As soon as I got outside, I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I walked quickly to my car, locking the doors the moment I got inside. I didn't look back. I spent the rest of the day replaying everything in my head. I don't know what it was, but something felt very off about that encounter. The way he kept pushing me, blocking the door, insisting I'd love the apartment. It felt like he wasn't just showing me a place to rent, it felt like he was trying to make me stay. Trying to trap me in some way I couldn't understand. I never called him back. I found another place a few days later, one that felt much safer, and I've been living there ever since. But every time I pass by that building, I feel a shiver run down my spine. I don't know what that man wanted, but I'm glad I got out when I did. It started small, just a couple of times. I didn't think much of it at first, honestly. When I moved into this neighborhood, I knew I would eventually meet the people around me. It was a quiet street, a mix of young families, retirees, and single professionals. Everyone mostly kept to themselves, which was fine by me. I liked my privacy, and I wasn't interested in becoming too close with anyone. But then I met Margaret, my neighbor from next door. At first, it seemed innocent enough. One evening, I was walking up the stairs to my front door when I saw her standing by her own door. She was a little older than me, in her early 50s, but friendly enough. She waved and came over to chat, something about how she'd noticed me moving in a few weeks ago. We made small talk. She told me she'd lived in the house for over a decade, and I gave her the standard response about being new to the area and trying to settle in. It wasn't long before she asked if I had a can of vegetable oil she could borrow. She said she was in the middle of cooking dinner, and she'd run out. I didn't think twice before I handed it over. "Of course, no problem," I said, handing her the can with a smile. She thanked me and promised to return it the next day. I didn't think anything more about it. That's just the kind of neighborly thing to do, right? The next day, at around 11 p.m., I heard a knock on my door. It was Margaret, holding the can of vegetable oil. "I'm so sorry, it got late," she said with a nervous laugh. "I just wanted to make sure you had it back before the night was over." I wasn't bothered by it. It was late, but she seemed like the type of person who wanted to make things right. "No problem," I said, smiling. "Thanks for bringing it back." Over the next few weeks, things continued like this. It was always something small, a cup of sugar, a set of measuring spoons, a screwdriver. She'd ask if she could borrow them, and most of the time, I'd say yes, thinking she was just being friendly. But then, without fail, she would show up at my door late at night, usually after 10 p.m., to return whatever she'd borrowed. It wasn't just the timing that started to bug me, though. It was the way she behaved when she came over. The first couple of times, it seemed normal enough. She'd knock, I'd answer. She'd give me whatever I had lent her, and we'd exchange pleasantries. But after a while, I noticed a pattern. She started lingering at the door longer than necessary. Just standing there, talking about random things. She'd mention something about her day, ask how my job was going, or bring up the weather in a way that felt almost rehearsed. It was always the same things, and it started to make me uncomfortable. Then came the night when it crossed a line. It was a Thursday, I remember. I had just gotten home from work and was preparing a quick dinner when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened it, I was surprised to see Margaret standing there. "Hey," she said with a soft smile. "I know it's late, but I just realized I've run out of tape. Could I borrow some? I'll return it tomorrow, I promise." I sighed, but it wasn't a big deal. I grabbed the tape from the drawer and handed it to her. "No problem," I said, trying to keep the conversation brief. "I've got to finish making dinner." But she didn't leave. She just stood there, almost as if waiting for me to invite her in. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, a little awkwardly. "Ah, well. I hope that helps." Instead of heading back to her own door like I expected, she stepped closer. "Actually," she said, her voice low, "do you mind if I come in for a second? I just need to use your bathroom real quick. I've been out all day, and I really need to go." Now, this was unusual. I had only known her for a few weeks, and while we'd exchanged pleasantries, I didn't feel comfortable with her coming inside. "Oh, I'm actually in the middle of something," I said, hoping she would get the hint. "Maybe next time?" She smiled, but it wasn't the same warm smile as before. It felt forced, like she was trying too hard to appear casual. "No worries. I'll just be quick," she said, before stepping over the threshold before I could stop her. I didn't know how to react. Part of me was saying this was a little too much, inviting herself in like that. But part of me didn't want to make a scene, so I just let it happen. I followed her inside, feeling this uncomfortable tension building in my chest. Margaret went straight to the bathroom without saying much, and I stood in the living room, trying to distract myself. A few moments later, she came out, not having said a word, and returned to the door. "Thanks again," she said, her tone a little too casual. "I really appreciate it." I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Something about her sudden invasion of my space felt off, but I was too tired and too uneasy to say anything. She left quietly, but that night I didn't sleep well. The next few days were more of the same. Small things, small requests, and always returning them later than expected. Each time, she seemed to linger a little longer. The conversations felt forced, the air always thick with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Her visits had become a regular part of my life now, and it was starting to get exhausting. I started avoiding answering the door when I knew she was going to come by. I pretended not to be home, even when I heard her knock. But it wasn't until one night that I realized just how far things had gone. I had just gotten home from a late shift and was exhausted. I barely had the energy to make a cup of tea when there was a knock at the door. I knew it was Margaret, and for once, I was too tired to be polite. I just let the silence stretch on, hoping she'd go away. But then I heard it, just the softest scratch against the door. It was so quiet I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it. Then it came again. A small tap, followed by the sound of something sliding across the bottom of the door. I bent down to look. There, just below the crack of the door, was a small envelope with my name written on it in black ink. I opened it carefully, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside was a note. "I think I've overstayed my welcome," it said. "I'll be back tonight. Don't worry, I'll leave soon enough." I didn't know what to do. I had never felt so trapped in my own home before. It had been happening for so long that I hadn't even realized how much it had affected me until now. I had never asked Margaret to leave me alone, but I couldn't help but wonder if I had been too passive about it. If I had somehow allowed her to push past my boundaries, even when I didn't want her to. I still haven't figured out what to do about it. I've been locking the door earlier, avoiding her as best I can, but the tension is still there. Margaret still comes by every few days, and I've started noticing strange things, items out of place, things that I didn't borrow or use, and the feeling that someone has been in my house when I wasn't around. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that everything is normal. I don't know what will happen if I tell her to stay away. But I know one thing, I need to do something. Because the longer I wait, the harder it's going to be to make her leave. I don't know why I didn't think twice about it. Maybe it was the fact that I was just trying to get rid of an old camera I didn't use anymore. Or maybe it was the excitement of making a little extra cash. Either way, I ended up agreeing to meet the buyer in a parking lot late one afternoon to finalize the sale. Looking back, it was stupid. I've listed the camera on one of those buy-sell groups online. It wasn't anything fancy, just an older model, but I figured someone would want it for a good price. The buyer seemed interested right away. His name was Jake. He messaged me asking if the camera was still available, and after a few quick back-and-forth messages, we agreed to meet up. I gave him the address of a small parking lot near a strip mall. It wasn't too busy, but it was public enough that I thought nothing of it. The day of the meeting came, and I had the camera packed up, ready to go. I got in my car and drove to the lot. As I pulled in, I saw a car already parked near the corner. It wasn't the one Jake had told me he'd be in, but I figured he had arrived early or parked elsewhere. I parked a few spaces away, keeping the camera bag with me. I sent him a quick message to let him know I had arrived, and he replied almost immediately, saying he was on his way and would be there in a minute. I was feeling good, thinking this was all going smoothly. Maybe a little too smooth. I saw a guy approaching my car, and I figured that was Jake. He was tall, wearing a hoodie, and he had a nervous energy about him. He walked up to my passenger side window and knocked on it. I rolled it down. "Hey, you Jake?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, man," he replied. "You got the camera?" I nodded, holding it up. "All set. Just like we talked about." He grinned, but there was something off about it. Cool. Mind if I check it out first? I've got to make sure it works." I handed it to him, still feeling confident that this was all above board. But then, just as he took the camera, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. 2 more guys had walked up to the car, one on each side. They were standing close, like they were trying to block me in. I froze for a second, my heart starting to race. I felt the air change, thick with tension. It was like something clicked in my head, and all of a sudden, everything didn't feel right anymore. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice trembling a little more than I intended. Jake didn't answer right away. He just kept looking at the camera, turning it over in his hands. The 2 others didn't say anything either. They just stood there, arms crossed, staring at me. That's when I realized they were all way too calm for a normal transaction. Then Jake looked up from the camera, and I saw it, the shift in his expression. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something darker. His eyes flicked over to the guy standing by my driver's side, and the other guy on the passenger side tensed up. Without warning, the guy on my side reached for the door handle and pulled it open. "Get out," he ordered. His voice was low, hard, like he had done this 1,000 times before. I didn't move. My brain was trying to process what was happening, but it was all too fast. They couldn't be serious, could they? But the way they were acting, the way they were closing in, told me everything I needed to know. They weren't here to buy anything. They were here to take it. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out something metallic. My brain didn't immediately register it, but it was a gun. He pointed it at me, the barrel trembling slightly, but the intent behind it was clear. "You're not getting out of this car," he said, his voice flat. "You're gonna give us everything." My pulse was pounding in my ears. My mind was racing, trying to think of something, anything to do. But I was stuck. I couldn't run. I couldn't fight them off. I was trapped, alone in a parking lot, with 3 guys who were clearly ready to hurt me if I didn't comply. The guy on the passenger side grabbed the camera bag from the seat next to me, tugging it hard until it came free. "What else you got?" he demanded, shoving the bag in my face. I could hear my breath catch in my chest. "I don't have anything else." "That's it, just the camera." Jake scoffed, not believing me. He leaned in closer, his breath hot on my face. "I'm not asking again. You got cash? Your phone? Anything else you're hiding?" I could feel my hands start to shake, but I didn't want to give them anything. I didn't want to lose everything I had on me, but I knew better than to fight back. These guys weren't playing. I could see it in their eyes. They weren't here for a deal. They were here to rob me, and they were getting desperate. The guy on the passenger side grabbed my phone from the seat next to me without even asking, tossing it into the back seat with the rest of my stuff. I was too stunned to do anything. My stomach felt like it was turning over in knots. Jake's hand tightened on the gun. "Everything," he said again, more insistently this time. "Give us the keys. You're gonna get out of the car." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I don't have any keys," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. That was a lie. I still had the car keys in my pocket, but I wasn't about to hand them over. I couldn't. If I did, I was as good as gone. Jake's eyes flicked to my pocket, and I saw the shift in his expression. The realization that I wasn't giving him everything he wanted. Without warning, he shoved the gun into my face, pressing the cold barrel against my cheek. "You're making this harder than it has to be," he said through gritted teeth. My chest was tight, my hands sweating. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get out of this. I was paralyzed with fear, but my mind was also working overtime. I could hear the sound of cars passing by in the distance, but the parking lot was empty. No one was around. I felt the car doors unlock. The guy on the passenger side had opened the door, and they were getting ready to drag me out. I had no time to waste. There was only one thing I could think of doing. I grabbed the steering wheel, yanked it hard, and slammed the car into reverse. The impact knocked the guy standing behind me off balance, and I heard him shout as I hit the gas. The car jerked back, scraping the side of the car next to me. In the chaos, Jake fired a shot, but I didn't stop. I floored it, tearing out of the parking lot and speeding down the street without a second thought. I didn't care where I was going, I just had to get away. I didn't stop until I saw a well-lit gas station. I pulled into the lot and jumped out of the car, running toward the door, my heart still racing. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. I didn't see them chasing me. I didn't even hear the sound of their car, but I wasn't taking any chances. I ran inside, told the cashier what had happened, and called the police. When they arrived, they took my statement, and I gave them everything I could remember about the guys, what they looked like, what their car looked like. But nothing came of it. They couldn't find them. No arrests were made. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten away. I don't know if they were just after the camera or if they had other plans. But I can tell you one thing, I'm never making that mistake again. It only takes one moment of trust to change everything. And when I let my guard down, everything almost came crashing down with it. I worked the night shift as a janitor in a big office building downtown. The kind of place that's never really empty, but there's nobody around at night except for me. The building is old, probably from the 70s, and it creaks a lot. The whole place is quiet, too quiet sometimes, but I've always gotten used to it. One night, things started getting weird. I was on the top floor, doing my usual rounds, mopping the halls when I heard a sound. At first, I thought it was the air conditioning kicking on or maybe a rat, but then it came again, a low thud followed by something that sounded like dragging. I froze, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But then it happened again. I figured maybe one of the workers had left something behind, or maybe I wasn't the only one left in the building. It was late, around 3 a.m., and I was alone on the upper floors, so I wasn't too worried. I went down the hall, following the sound toward the old elevator shaft. It was dark back there, not the kind of place anyone would typically go. The elevator was out of service, but there was a maintenance room nearby with an old key I had from when I started working there. I used it to open the door and turn the light on, half expecting to see an open window or a draft causing the weird noise. But there was nothing like that. The room was just filled with old equipment, and the walls had a layer of dust on them. No signs of anyone being in there. I was about to turn back when I heard it again. This time, it sounded like it was coming from above. I looked up toward the ceiling, trying to figure out what could be up there, and that's when I saw something strange. The old air vents were covered in what looked like footprints. I froze again. I knew for a fact nobody had been up there. The building had been locked up for weeks, and the upper floors were completely unused. But someone had been up there recently. The prints led up toward the ceiling, like someone had climbed inside the fence system. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just another prank. Maybe some college kids had gotten in somehow. I walked back toward the stairwell, feeling uneasy. The elevator shaft was right next to the stairs, and as I turned the corner, I saw something move. It was a person. A man. He wasn't in a uniform or anything, just a regular guy, but he was moving in a way that made me uncomfortable, slow, almost like he was trying to be quiet. I didn't know who he was or what he was doing there, but I froze. He hadn't noticed me yet, so I quickly ducked around the corner, holding my breath. I heard him stop for a moment, and then the footsteps started again, this time closer. It was then that I realized he must have been living up there. I could hear him shuffling around, like he was rummaging through something. I felt a wave of panic rush through me, but I didn't know what to do. I wasn't trained to handle situations like this. I slowly backed up toward the stairwell. The last thing I wanted was for him to know I was there, but I was so scared that I accidentally knocked over a mop bucket. It clattered loudly against the tile floor, echoing down the hall. The man froze. I didn't wait for him to make the next move. I turned and bolted for the stairwell. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just needed to get out. I could hear him coming after me, his footsteps slapping against the linoleum, getting closer. I slammed open the door to the stairwell and ran down, 3 floors at once. My heart was racing, my mind telling me to go faster, but I couldn't get my legs to move any quicker. I reached the ground floor and ran straight to the front desk. The night security guard was there, sitting behind the desk, but his back was to me. I was out of breath, trying to explain what happened, but he didn't seem concerned. "There's no one up there," he said, turning around to look at me. "What do you mean there's no one?" "I just saw someone," I said, my voice shaking. He shrugged, like it was nothing. "Maybe a homeless person snuck in through the back. We've had a few of them before." I didn't know if I believed him. I didn't know who to trust anymore. But I didn't want to stick around to find out. The next day, I called the building manager and told him about the footprints and the man I had seen. He didn't seem to care much either. He said the place had been empty for a long time and that they had already hired security to handle the situation if anything unusual came up. I thought about what would have happened if I had been too slow or if the guy had caught me. I haven't been back to the top floor since that night, and I've heard from other janitors that they've been noticing strange things too. We all keep our distance from the upper floors now. I don't know who was up there, or how long they've been living in the building, but every time I hear a strange noise late at night, I remember that feeling of being watched from the shadows. It still keeps me up sometimes, wondering if they're still there. I never thought much about picking up hitchhikers, but it was late, and the rain had started coming down hard. I was driving back from a business trip, and I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. The roads were quiet, and I could barely see more than a few feet in front of me because of the rain. Then, on the side of the road, I saw him just standing there, drenched, thumb out, staring into the headlights. I debated for a second. Normally, I wouldn't stop, but something made me pull over. Maybe it was the way he looked. He seemed harmless, just a guy in his mid-30s, with a rain-soaked jacket and a tired face. I rolled down the window a bit. "You need a ride?" I asked. He nodded quickly, stepping toward the car. "Yeah, please. I've been waiting for a while." I unlocked the door, and he slid in. He thanked me as he shut the door, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Just past Clearwater," he said, looking out the window. "I'll get off soon. Just need to get out of the rain." "Clearwater?" "That's a couple hours away," I said, but I didn't mind. It was getting late, and I'd rather have some company on the road than not. We were the only 2 cars on the highway, and the rain wasn't showing any sign of stopping. "Yeah," he said, looking back at me. "I've got a friend out there. He's expecting me." His voice was calm, maybe a bit too calm for someone who had just been standing out in the pouring rain for who knows how long. I nodded and kept driving. For the next 20 minutes, there was silence between us. It wasn't uncomfortable, but there was something strange about him. He didn't seem to mind the quiet, and every so often, I'd catch him looking at me, like he was studying me. "You from around here?" he asked after a while. "No, just passing through," I replied. "Work trip?" He nodded slowly, his eyes drifting back to the window. "Yeah, me too. Just passing through. Gotta get somewhere important." I didn't know why, but something about that made me uneasy. It was like the way he said it, like he was hiding something. I kept my focus on the road, trying not to let my mind wander. After about another 10 minutes, I heard him shift in his seat. I glanced over and saw him looking at me, but his expression was different now. Harder. It wasn't that friendly face anymore. His eyes were cold. "You know," he said, his voice low, "you didn't really have to stop, you know. You didn't have to pick me up." I felt a little chill run down my spine, but I tried to stay calm. "You looked like you needed help," I said, glancing at him for a second before focusing back on the road. "I don't need anyone's help," he said, and now there was a sharpness to his voice. It wasn't the same person who had gotten into the car a while ago. "I just needed a ride, and now I'm stuck with you." I didn't know what to say. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe he was just a little too tired or maybe he'd had a rough day. "It's all right," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Just trying to be friendly. He didn't respond. The air in the car had shifted. It wasn't the rain anymore, but something about the way he was sitting in his seat, his eyes locked on me, made the car feel smaller. He was still staring at me, unblinking. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "You should probably get out when we hit the next exit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't move. Didn't say a word for a long time. I glanced at him, just as the headlights cut through the rain. "Hey," I said. Before I could finish, he suddenly reached forward, grabbing the door handle like he was about to throw it open. I swerved to the side, almost hitting the guardrail. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to regain control of the car. "Stop!" I yelled, my voice shaking now. He let go of the handle, but he was still staring at me, his face twisted into something I couldn't quite read. "You think I'm just gonna let you tell me what to do? You think I'm just gonna get out when you say so?" The rain was pounding harder now, and the headlights barely cut through it. I tried to focus on the road, my hands slipping on the wheel. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I said, my voice shaky. "You're not as nice as you think," he muttered. "You pick me up, so you deal with me now." I was starting to panic, but I tried not to show it. I didn't want to make him angrier. "I'll pull over at the next exit," I said. "You can get out there." He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his seat and chuckled. It wasn't a laugh, it was a low, eerie sound, like he was mocking me. "You think I'm gonna get out? After all this?" I looked at him again, this time fully aware of the danger. He wasn't planning on leaving. I knew it then, but I wasn't sure what to do. "You need to get out," I said again, my voice firm, but my heart was racing. But now he just grinned. It was a slow, deliberate smile, and something in it made me want to vomit. "You don't get it, do you?" "I'm not getting out," he said. I was trembling now, but I wasn't about to let him have control. I quickly reached for my phone, planning to call for help, but before I could do anything, he reached across the seat and grabbed my wrist. His fingers were like iron, digging into my skin. "You can't just call someone," he hissed. I yanked my wrist away, my mind racing. I had to think fast. I couldn't let him control this situation. I focused on the road, trying to remain calm, even though panic was rising inside me. I remembered the gun I kept in the glove box. I had never used it, but I had it there for situations like this. He must have seen the shift in my expression because he leaned forward, his face inches from mine. "You think that'll help?" he whispered, his breath hot and rank in my face. But before I could react, I saw the lights of another car in the distance. Relief flooded me, and for a split second, I thought I might get out of this alive. The car was close, and I steered toward it. My foot slammed on the gas, and I cut across 2 lanes to get behind the other vehicle. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the hitchhiker still watching me, his eyes burning into the back of my skull. I wasn't safe yet, but I was getting closer. I couldn't go back to the road we'd been on, but I could keep driving. I had to keep driving, away from him, away from whatever the hell he had planned. When I finally found a gas station and stopped, I jumped out of the car, locked the doors, and ran inside. I didn't stop until I was inside, safe. The stranger never followed me inside, but I swear I saw him standing outside in the rain, watching me through the window. It started a week ago, but I still can't get the images out of my head. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forget what happened. I had surgery. Nothing too serious, just a routine procedure, but it left me needing a few days of recovery at the hospital. My doctor assured me that everything would be fine. It wasn't a big hospital, not the kind you see in the city, but one of those smaller ones that's out in the country, more isolated. The kind of place where everyone knows each other, and the staff are familiar with every patient that walks through the door. I wasn't worried. After the surgery, I was groggy, mostly asleep, and I didn't notice much. But I woke up in the middle of the night, disoriented, and I realized something was off. My room felt different. The lights were dim, but the place felt too quiet. Too still. At first, I thought maybe it was just the after effects of the anesthesia, but as I looked around, I realized something wasn't right. There was someone sitting at the far side of the room, near the window, just staring at me. I couldn't make out the details, but I could see the shape of a person hunched over, their face in shadows. My heart raced, and I tried to sit up, but the pain from the surgery shot through my chest. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. I wasn't sure what to expect, but the person didn't answer. They just sat there, motionless. My throat was dry, and I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I thought maybe it was a nurse or someone from the hospital just checking in on me, but the silence was unnerving. After a few moments, the person shifted slightly. I could make out the faint outline of handcuffs on their wrists. That's when the panic set in. I was alone with someone who had been restrained. That's when I heard a faint shuffle and the jangle of metal. I tried to call out again, but nothing came out. My throat was too dry. I could barely move, still recovering from the surgery, and now my mind was racing with questions. Why was someone in handcuffs here? Why hadn't anyone told me about this? The person moved slightly. I could feel my heart in my throat as I watched the shadows. I tried to stay calm, but I could hear the faint clink of metal every time they shifted in their seat. I needed help. I needed to get out of there. My instinct was to press the nurse call button, but when I reached for it, I realized the cord had been cut. That's when I started to panic. I tried to look around the room, my vision still blurry from the meds, but the silence was suffocating. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The door to my room, which was supposed to be locked for safety, was ajar. And that's when I heard it. The faint sound of footsteps approaching. My blood ran cold. I tried to force myself to stand, but the pain from my stitches was too much. Every movement felt like my body was on fire. I froze, every muscle tense, straining to hear any sound that would indicate help was near. The footsteps stopped. The person at the window was still, but I could sense their attention shifting. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, but I couldn't make myself look directly at them. My breath was shallow now, and I realized the situation was far worse than I had initially thought. Whoever this was, this person locked up and sitting in my hospital room wasn't supposed to be here. That's when I heard the voice, low and gravelly. It was like a whisper, but it carried enough to send a chill down my spine. "Stay quiet," the voice said, barely above a whisper. I froze. My instinct screamed at me to call for help, but I knew it would be useless. There was no one coming. I was alone. I don't know how long we stayed like that. The silence was unbearable. My only focus was the handcuffs, the metallic sound, the person in my room. My thoughts raced through possibilities, none of them good. Then it happened. The lights went out. The whole hospital went dark, and all I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat and the distant hum of the emergency generator kicking in. The power failure was brief, just long enough to leave the entire building in pitch black darkness. It was enough to make everything seem even more sinister. I could hear the person standing up now, moving in the dark, footsteps coming closer. I felt my entire body freeze in terror. Then the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against the floor reached my ears, and the person moved closer. "Stay down," they whispered again, this time with a little more force. I barely had time to react before the door to my room slammed open with a force that rattled the walls. Someone entered, loud, deliberate footsteps. It was one of the police officers, and I couldn't tell whether they were here to help or if they were part of what was going on. "Is everything okay in here?" the officer asked, voice heavy with suspicion, but he didn't come into the room. The person in the shadows, the one in handcuffs, spoke again, their voice shaking slightly now. "Get me out of here," they demanded, not in a whisper this time. Their voice was more commanding, urgent. "I can't do that," the officer responded, his tone firm but unsure. "You're not going anywhere." For a moment, the room was still. Then, without warning, the figure lunged forward. There was a scuffle. The sound of metal clanging, followed by a scream. I couldn't see anything. I was paralyzed, trapped in the bed, too terrified to move. I heard the officer shout, then a gunshot. The crack of it echoed through the room, but the silence that followed was worse than anything. I could feel something was wrong, but I couldn't see anything. My mind couldn't comprehend what had just happened. The officer came in finally, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, and I saw him kneeling beside me. He was saying something, but I couldn't hear it over the ringing in my ears. I was moved quickly after that, taken to another room. The doctor came in to check on me, but I was still too disoriented to make sense of it all. Later, I learned the full story. The person who had been in my room wasn't just any criminal. They were violent, dangerous, and had been caught on charges I didn't want to know. The officer had been keeping them in my room by mistake. They'd been placed in the wrong ward. The power outage had been the perfect opportunity for them to escape, except they didn't expect the officer to intervene. But by then, it was too late for me. I couldn't erase the memory of that night, the feeling of being trapped in a room with someone who should never have been there. It took weeks for me to feel safe again. And I still don't trust hospitals. The whole thing still feels unreal. But it happened, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it. We had been looking forward to this trip for months. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway, just the four of us, out in the wilderness for a weekend of hiking, fishing, and a bit of relaxation. It was a fairly remote site, a campsite that had been reserved in advance. The kind of place where you wouldn't run into too many people, just the peace and quiet of the forest. We arrived a little later than planned, just as the sun was dipping behind the treetops, casting long shadows across the ground. We were all tired, but excited, ready to set up camp. When we pulled into the area, we noticed something right away. It wasn't what we expected. The spot where our camp should have been was empty. But there was something else there, a mess. The tents, all of them, were torn and half collapsed. Some were shredded, others just left in a pile, and there was a faint smell in the air, kind of sour and rotting. We all got out of the truck, staring at the mess. At first, I thought it might have been an animal. Maybe a bear or something had gotten into the camp and destroyed everything. But there was something off about it. It didn't feel right. Maybe it's just an old camp, Mark suggested. He's always the one trying to make light of things. Maybe they didn't clean up or something. But as we looked around, it was clear this wasn't just some careless camp. The food that was left out was rotten cans of beans and tuna, half-open bags of chips, and boxes of crackers. All of it was covered in mold. The smell was unbearable. We walked further into the camp, and that's when I noticed the markings on the trees. They weren't just scratches or random carvings. They were deliberate, almost like symbols, but I couldn't make sense of them. They looked old, but also fresh, like someone had marked them recently. "What the hell is this?" Sarah whispered, pointing at one of the trees. The symbol was crudely scratched into the bark, something jagged and unnatural. We all stood there for a second, unsure of what to make of it. There was no sign of any people around. Just the empty, destroyed camp and the strange markings. I felt uneasy, like we weren't supposed to be there. Mark was still trying to make it seem less alarming, like it was just a coincidence. He suggested we go ahead and set up our camp anyway, even though this wasn't our designated spot. The site wasn't far from where we had planned to camp, so we figured it wouldn't hurt to just stay there for the night. We started unpacking, and that's when we realized something else. There were things missing, small things at first. My lighter, Sarah's small first aid kit, and some of our water bottles. At first, I thought we were just misplacing them, but then I realized someone else must have been here recently. Maybe we weren't the only ones who found this site. I mentioned it to the group, but everyone else shrugged it off. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't want to be the one to ruin the trip. The sun had almost set, so we started the campfire and decided to have dinner. That's when the sound started. At first, it was nothing, just the usual rustling of the trees and the crackling of the fire. But then, we heard something else. It was quiet at first, footsteps, soft and slow, like someone walking around our camp. It wasn't a random noise, it was deliberate, like someone was moving around the perimeter. We all stopped talking, listening. The footsteps came closer. My heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like we were being watched. I told everyone to stay quiet. I grabbed a flashlight from my bag, and we all huddled together, staring out into the dark. I was about to say something, but then I heard a twig snap, and that's when I saw it. In the distance, near the edge of the camp, a shadow moved between the trees. It was just for a second, but it was enough. Someone was out there. Someone who shouldn't be. I don't know why, but I felt sick, like something wasn't right. Sarah was the first to stand up, telling everyone to stay calm. She was usually the calm one in the group. She suggested we head to the truck, just to be safe. But when we went to grab our things, that's when we found it. The truck, the one we parked just a few hours earlier, was gone. It didn't make any sense. We hadn't driven anywhere. None of us had. But the truck was gone. The spot where we parked it was empty, the dirt and gravel untouched. It was like it had never been there. I don't know what kind of game this was, but I was starting to panic. We were in the middle of nowhere, with no way out. We decided to take a look around the camp again, maybe try to figure out if there was anything we missed. That's when I found the note. It was stuck to the underside of one of the broken tents. A small piece of paper, yellowed with age, with strange handwriting on it. It wasn't in any language I recognized, and it made my skin crawl just looking at it. I couldn't make out most of it, but at the bottom of the page, there was a date almost a year ago, to the day. The same time of year. And then, below it, one last line, they never left. I showed the others, and Sarah looked as pale as I felt. Mark was quiet for once. We all stood there, staring at the note. That's when we realized the truth. The people who had been here before, they were gone. They had vanished. No sign of them anywhere. And whatever had happened to them, it wasn't something we wanted to find out. We packed up our things and started walking in the opposite direction, away from the camp. The symbols on the trees, the weird note, the truck gone, it all started to make sense in a way that terrified me. Whoever had been here before us, whoever had left that note, they weren't normal. And I wasn't about to stick around to find out what had happened to them. As we walked away from the camp, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing just out of sight. We didn't stop until we reached the nearest road, and even then, I couldn't stop looking back into the trees, waiting for something or someone to come after us. We never went back to that place. We don't talk about it anymore, but sometimes, when we're all together, we'll mention it in passing. We don't speak of it too much. I don't think any of us ever really got over what happened that weekend. But one thing I know for sure is that there's something in those woods. Something we'll never understand. It had been raining for hours by the time we decided to stop for the night. The forecast had said scattered showers, but it turned into a steady downpour that turned the dirt roads into slippery paths. Our plan was simple: drive out to the woods, set up camp, and get away from everything for a weekend. It was supposed to be a break from work, stress, all that. None of us thought to check if the spot we picked was public land. It just looked like a good place to pitch a tent, and it was getting dark fast. There were 4 of us, me, Jason, Claire, and Matt. We parked near a clearing by the trees. It wasn't an official campsite, but it looked secluded and quiet. We got the tents up quickly despite the rain. The sound of the drops hitting the canvas was loud but kind of calming. After that, we sat around under a tarp Jason had brought, trying to keep the fire going with damp wood. We laughed a bit, told some stories, but we were all soaked, so the fun didn't last long. By 11, we gave up and went to bed. It must have been around 2 in the morning when I woke up. I wasn't sure why at first. The rain had lightened up, just a faint tapping against the tent now. Everything was quiet except for that. I thought maybe I had heard an animal or something, but when I listened closer, I heard voices. Low, angry voices. I unzipped the sleeping bag carefully and leaned toward the tent door, straining to hear. Jason's tent was closest to mine, and I could hear him whispering to someone. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but the tone wasn't good. He sounded scared. Then I heard another voice, deep and sharp, cutting through the rain. "You've got no right to be here," it said. I froze. I could tell it wasn't one of us, and it was angry. I peeked through the small mesh window on the tent and saw a flashlight beam swinging around outside. It landed on Jason's face for a second, and he winced. The light moved, and then I saw him, an older man, tall and broad, wearing a camo jacket and a wide-brimmed hat. He was holding a rifle. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing. The man pointed the rifle at the ground near Jason's feet and barked, "You think you can just walk onto someone's property and do whatever you like? Who gave you permission?" Jason stammered something about not knowing, about it being an accident. The man didn't seem to care. His voice got louder. "An accident? You think that makes it okay? You've got 10 seconds to pack up and leave, or I'll make you leave. You hear me? I wanted to get up, to help Jason somehow, but I was terrified. I didn't know if the man would see me as a threat or if he'd just turn the gun on me too. I stayed crouched in the tent, gripping my phone, even though I had no signal out here. Claire must have heard it too, because I saw the light from her phone flashlight flicker on in her tent. That was a mistake. The man noticed it immediately. "Who else is out here?" he shouted, swinging the rifle toward her tent. He stomped toward it, the beam of his flashlight bouncing wildly as he moved. "Come out. Now!" Jason tried to say something, maybe to calm him down, but the man shoved him backward. Jason stumbled and fell, landing hard in the mud. Claire unzipped her tent slowly and stepped out with her hands up, shaking. Matt's tent was still zipped shut, no movement from inside. He was either frozen like me or still asleep somehow. The man's face was pale and lined, and his eyes were wild. He waved the rifle between Jason and Claire, spitting questions. "How many of you are there? What are you doing here? You spying on me?" Claire stammered something about just camping, just passing through. The man didn't seem to believe her. He kept muttering under his breath, things like, "liars," and "think you can sneak around my land." Then he looked at her tent, then Jason's, then mine. His eyes narrowed. "There's more of you, isn't there? Come out, all of you." I didn't know what to do. If I stayed hidden, he might think we were trying to trick him, but if I came out, I didn't know what he'd do. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Finally, I unzipped the tent slowly, keeping my hands visible. I stepped out into the wet grass, my socks soaking through instantly. The man stared at me, his jaw tight. "Another one," he said, almost to himself. He pointed the rifle toward the last tent, Matt's. "What about him?" Before I could answer, Matt's tent unzipped. He came out with his hands up like the rest of us, his face pale and scared. The man stared at all four of us, his flashlight flickering over each of our faces. For a moment, he didn't say anything, just breathed heavily. Then he spat on the ground and said, "You've got 5 minutes. Pack up and get off my land. If I see you here again, I'll shoot first and ask questions later." None of us moved right away. He shouted, "Now," and that got us going. We scrambled to take down the tents, our hands fumbling with the wet fabric and slippery poles. The man stood there the whole time, his rifle resting on his hip, watching us with cold eyes. It took longer than 5 minutes, but he didn't stop us. He just kept muttering to himself, shaking his head like we'd done something personal to him. When we finally had everything packed, we started toward the car. Jason tried to apologize again, but the man cut him off. "Just go," he said, "and don't come back." We didn't need to be told twice. We piled into the car, and Jason started it up, the tires spinning a little in the mud before catching. As we drove away, I looked back and saw the man still standing there, his flashlight beam following us until we were out of sight. We didn't stop driving until we hit the main road, miles away. No one said much after that. We just sat there, soaked and shaken, the rain still pounding on the roof. We knew we'd been lucky. The man could have done a lot worse than yell at us. I still think about him sometimes, the way he looked at us, like we weren't people, just intruders. It makes me wonder what he was so afraid of or what he was hiding. I had been living in my house for a couple of years when I decided it was time for a change. The kitchen was outdated, and the bathroom needed work. I'd heard about a contractor from a friend who had done some remodeling in her home and recommended him. He seemed professional when we met, and his references checked out. I felt comfortable hiring him to do the job. I work long hours, so I figured it would be easier for him to come by during the day while I was at work. He was going to handle everything, the demo, the construction, and all the finishing touches. I trusted him to do a good job, but I didn't think much of it when I left for work every day. I was busy, and I had other things on my mind. The first few days went smoothly. He showed up early, worked long hours, and left when I got home. The house looked like a mess with all the construction, but I figured that was just part of the process. After a week or so, the kitchen cabinets were out, the counters were being replaced, and the walls had been stripped down. It was messy, but it was clear he was making progress. But then things started to feel off. I had a feeling that something wasn't right when I came home one evening and found my bedroom door slightly open. I had never left it open, and it wasn't like I had forgotten. I'm not someone who leaves doors open unless I'm in and out of a room. The rest of the house was just as I had left it, so I didn't think much of it at the time. The next day, I came home and found the same thing. My bedroom door was ajar, and I could have sworn I had closed it. I started to feel uneasy but told myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was forgetful. Maybe the door didn't latch properly, or maybe I had left it open without thinking. I tried to dismiss it, but it kept happening. Every day, I'd come home to find my bedroom door open, and sometimes other rooms felt slightly different. The couch cushions were arranged differently, or a picture frame that I hadn't touched was crooked. Little things that didn't make sense. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it or if something strange was really going on. But every time I walked into the house, I felt a chill in the air, like someone else had been there. Then one evening, I had an idea. I'd started working from home occasionally, so I decided to stay in the house and keep an eye on things. I made sure to close my bedroom door before I left for work. I wanted to see if anything changed while I was gone. That evening, when I came home, I opened the door slowly, and my stomach dropped. It was open. Wide open. I stood there, frozen, trying to figure out what was going on. I had clearly locked it before leaving, and now it was wide open, just like the other times. I went inside, checking for anything else that was out of place. That's when I noticed the camera. It was small, hidden on the corner of the room, nearly impossible to see unless you were specifically looking for it. I felt sick. My hands were shaking. My first thought was to call the police, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it wasn't what I thought it was. But I knew I had to get confirmation before doing anything drastic. The next morning, I made sure to leave the camera exactly where it was. I left for work as usual, but this time I went to the local store and bought a few things. I wasn't sure what I was planning to do, but I had to know. I wanted to see if there were more cameras in the house. I came back that evening, pretending everything was normal. I went straight to my bedroom and checked the camera again. Sure enough, it had been moved. The angle was slightly different, as though someone had been adjusting it while I was gone. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was being watched. I was sure of it now. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to trust. I knew I couldn't confront him just yet. What if he denied it? What if it escalated? I had to be careful. But I had no idea how deep this had gone or how long it had been going on. I knew he'd been in my house when I wasn't there, but I couldn't figure out how long this had been happening. The next day, I took the camera to a friend who worked in tech. I told her what had been happening and showed her the footage. It was unmistakable. He had been recording me. He had been watching my every move when I was at home, when I was alone. My worst fears were coming true. He had been in my personal space, invading my privacy for God knows how long. I called the police that night. I told them everything. They came to the house, and we looked through the footage together. There were hours of recordings, me walking around the house, sitting on the couch, making dinner, even moments when I was changing clothes. I felt disgusted, violated, like everything I had was no longer mine. The worst part was not knowing how long he'd been doing this. How many times had he watched me when I was completely unaware? The police didn't waste any time. They went to his office, and they found more cameras, more hidden equipment. Apparently, he had been doing this to other clients as well. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I had been living in a nightmare. Someone I had trusted to do work in my house had turned out to be someone I should have never let through my door. I never saw him again after that day. I don't know what happened to him, but I know he was arrested and charged with multiple offenses. It's been months now, and I still don't feel safe in my own house. I've had all the locks changed and the security system upgraded. But no matter what I do, I can't stop feeling like I'm being watched. Like I'm never really alone. I've been trying to move on, but some days it's harder than others. I still check my bedroom door, even though I know it's locked. And sometimes, I wonder how many people out there are doing the same thing he did to me, hiding in plain sight.